Peace and power, family. How is everyone? Welcome, welcome, welcome to the RAM, Resurgence of the African Mind Book Club. Thank you for joining us. This week, we are going to be starting with Chapter 3. And of course, as everyone knows, we are reading Blueprint for Black Power by Amos Wilson. Now, family, I wanted to give you a few updates. My website, LiliLaPoeteSpeaks.com, is now up and running. And we are going to be using that website as the platform for the RAM Book Club. We have a page exclusively for the club. We're going to blog about it. We're going to also provide links to the Hangouts and to the YouTube if you would just like to listen on every week. But you can also still be able to find those links on dr.maat's page, Deanna Bailey, on Facebook. You can find it there as well. But we definitely want to try to use that as a platform. If you want to discuss more throughout the week, if you missed it on Sunday, if you want to go back, I'm actually setting up a study guide, if you will. So maybe if you haven't had the opportunity to purchase the book and you don't have time maybe to watch the whole discussions that we have on Sunday, you can go to, once again, www.LiliLaPoetespeaks.com. And you can stay updated from there. You can subscribe to the website and you can stay updated to blog posts and other cool things that we have on the website. So check it out when you get a chance, family. And if you don't know, my name is Alima La Poete, aka Alima Njai, author of Perceptions of a Misplaced African, Volume 1. And we're going to take this time to allow everyone on the panel to introduce themselves. Brother Travis. Okay, Sister Raquel. I don't know if the panel doesn't want to introduce themselves.
Hello, oh, I'm sorry, I'm having some speaker issues. Sorry about that.
There he is.
Yeah, there I am. This is Brother Travis from Detroit. I'm happy to be with the community, and hotep everybody.
Hotep. Sister Raquel?
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm here, sis. I was trying to find out how to take myself off mute. But my name is Sister Raquel Ali. I am from Yonkers, and I am a Black Studies major. And I'm happy to be here because, as I stated before, this is a book that I was supposed to have been reading a while ago. And unfortunately, I have not done it. So I'm happy to be a part of this club.
Indeed, indeed. Brother Knowledge.
Peace to the families. Brother Knowledge, born alive, Blue Knowledge Radio. Definitely honored to be here for another week. 3 down, 28 more to go. We here, can't stop, won't stop. Resurgence to the African mind. Salute to the panel, love and honor to everybody.
Brother Andre. Brother Andre. Brother Andre, you want to introduce yourself? You're on mute. We can't hear you. Oh, Lord. We can't hear you, brother. He don't even know either.
Brother Andre, you have to take your phone, you have to take it off mute so we can hear you. We can't hear you. So you got to take it off mute, brother.
Oh, Lord.
Oh, man, I'm wondering if I can, like...
Can you take it off mute?
Nope, I can't.
Can you go ahead and introduce yourself, Sister Camille? Hello, how are you, Queen?
Hey, Queen, how you doing?
Doing well, doing well.
Black African Power. My name is Camille Gaynor Jones. Good to be here with everyone.
Dr. Maat.
Oh, I see your brother just joined.
Oh, wait. Oh, Brother Rex. Introduce yourself.
Oh.
I don't know what he's doing, sis. Brother Rex? I don't know. Let's just put him on mute and go ahead, sis.
Yeah, I didn't mean to be rude, but I mean, sorry, sister. Like,
Yes, that's all right.
All right. So peace and power, family. My name is dr.maat.msu. I am the co-founder of Ed Anime Productions and the executive of the Meltrek series. Ed Anime Productions is a Black-owned and operated company that produces educational materials for children. And right now we have a cartoon series available by the name of Meltrek. It's an animated hip hop series that teaches children African history from an African perspective. So please, family, go and support. Visit edanimeproductions.com to see what we have, or you can simply go to the Google search engine, type in Meltrek, and our website will come up. So please support the Meltrek project. And that's it. I'm ready to get into it, Sister Alima. This chapter, we're in chapter 3 of our text, Blueprint for Black Power. And I must say, Sister Alima, I don't know if it's just me, but I find myself highlighting like the majority of every page.
Yes.
This text is phenomenal. And in fact, I called Sababu last week, and I was just in his ear, like rambling, about the text. And I was just telling them how excited I am just to read it, because it's packed with a lot of empowering information. So it's not just information that Dr. Amos Wilson disseminated in this text. He disseminated a lot of empowering information that if we apply correctly, it definitely, and no doubt, it would empower us as a collective. And so I love it. I read chapter 3. We all read chapter 3, and it talks about culture. It talks about family. It talks about the Black church. It talks about, what else? Individualism. So I feel like Dr. Amos Wilson really brought it in this chapter. He defines what culture is and how it's, utilized to amass power. Then he talks about the family and how the family should operate. And sis, I think that is so powerful, because many of us believe that we have formed families because we have shared consanguinity. So because we have the same blood, we're like, oh, we're family. But do we really operate like a family? A lot of us weren't taught how to operate as a family, or how a family should function. And so I think that it was very dynamic that he, that he presented this in this text. So anyway, let's get into it. So chapter 3, social and cultural origins of power. So in this, he talks about culture and power. Someone want to start off, or do you guys want me to just kind of go?
Go ahead, sis.
Okay. So on page 56, first section is culture and power. He defines social power, and he says that social power is generated by the social alignment or relative positioning of individuals within groups, and the alignment and position of groups vis-a-vis each other within large social organizations. All right. Organizations, societies, cultures, nations, and various coalitions or alliances in order to achieve mutually desired ends. So then he goes into culture, and he describes culture as a type of power system. And he's saying that when you look at culture, it's a power system that consists of different components, which he calls subcultural systems. And then at the bottom of the page, he says culture is man's adaptive dimension. So he's saying that it's a power system, right, which may be nested or organically related to or one another. All right, so it's a power system. He said the overall power system, which may include family, kinship, communal, regional, other types of social and institutional organizations. So it's a power system that consists of many different components. All right, so he quotes Ashley Montague when he says, man alone among the forms of animated nature is the creature that has moved into an adaptive zone, which is an entirely learned one. This is a zone of culture, the man-made, the learned, the part of the environment. So the difference between us, Sister Alima, and them, or like other low, I don't want to call them lower animals, but what separates us or what distinguishes us from other animals or other creatures is that we develop cultures to survive. We develop cultures to survive in our environment. And I think that's what he was trying to get across on page 56. So then he goes into, this is page 57. He continues his conversation about culture. And he said it is the social institutional instrument which is crucial for facilitating people's adaptation to the complexities of their world. So all of us exist in an environment, and we produce or we create cultures that will allow us to survive and thrive in that environment. All right. So he goes into the next section, the family as a power system. He says, wait a minute, culture is a social machine, a power grid system. So he says the family is one such fundamental cultural subsystem. So the family is a system that exists inside of the mother system of culture, right? So it's a subsystem. So he says, I love how he describes the family. He says that the family is a primary organization. A lot of us don't think about family, Sister Alima, as an organization. It's kind of like you have your mom, your dad, maybe, your mom, maybe, your sisters, your brothers, you know, aunts, uncles, cousins, grandma, and grandpa. But we never look at the family as a system or as an organization, right? So he defines the family. He said it's an organization. He said an organization, a fundamental generator or source of power where human and non-human capital resources of its members are pooled and shared, right, as a means of achieving its vital goals. So our vital goals, what are our vital goals? Food, clothing, and shelter, and in protection of that food, clothing, and shelter. So he's saying, well, family, what we do as a family is we come together and we aggregate our resources to accomplish our vital goals. And our vital goals is food, clothing, and shelter, and of course, protection. All right. So he goes on to say that these goals, he said it includes sexual reproduction, socialization of his children, securing a common habitation, providing protection and affectional relations among its members, maintaining and enhancing the social status of its members, and providing their economic well-being. So the next paragraph, he goes into, he further elaborates on the family. And he's saying that, you know, within your family, you learn social relationships, or you learn how to socially interact with people, starting with your family. He also says that you learn power and authority, starting with your family. So all of the things that we learn, how to treat people, power, authority, hierarchy, all of these things come or start within the family. So now we can see, Sister Alima, how if the family is disorganized, then so will the community, so will the society be. Well, first of all, the individual, right, the member will be kind of dysfunctional, right? If the family is disorganized and dysfunctional, so will its members be, and then those members had to go into society and go into a community, you know? So we see how it all starts with the family. And so, and he talks about the power or the influence that a family has on its young. It says, consequently, the family as a power system markedly influences members, particularly its young's attitudes toward and relationships to power and authority, both within and without the family. Thus, there's an important continuity between the nature of power, its quantity, quality, and organization within the family, and the nature of social and power relations between the family and its physical and social environment, including other families and institutions, which together constitute a larger social system, such as a clan, tribe, nation, or culture. So, Sister Alima, you know, we talk about nation building a lot, but what we need to understand is that nation building starts with our family, right? Because a community, when you think of a community is a network of families, right? And then a community is a network of families. And then when you look at I don't want to say a community of a community, but when you look at a network of communities, that forms your tribe, that forms your culture, that forms your nation. But the atom of that nation or that tribe is the family. That's the foundation of that nation. So we talk about nation building, but and that's good and all, but we need to also focus on the family, which is the foundation of the nation. I'm on page 56. Can somebody else jump in? I feel like I've been kind of rambling.
Camille?
Page 57.
58, sis.
We're on 58.
On the page of 58.
Yes.
If we substitute the phrase economically successful tribes for the phrase in the latter italicized paragraph above, and in terms of economic and political warfare instead of military warfare, we would more closely approximate the contemporary political economic relations between white Americans and immigrant Americans and Black Americans in the contemporary United States. So basically what it's saying is we swap out, we're always looking at things like, military force, but a lot of the things that we're under are like, economic warfare, economic depravement in our communities. And that allows other people to come in and take advantage of us, white Americans or, immigrants from other countries. That is the rather superior organization of family, kinship, and communal groups and resources of the white Americans and various immigrants have facilitated their political and the African American community. Besides the fact that the organizations are based on family, kinship, community, and ethnic relationships, they are based more profoundly on cultural identity, values, and attitudes.
Keep going, sis. Keep going.
A culture generates effective power when it aligns its subcultural, social, and individual units, especially its family and communal units, in such ways that they can most effectively create and exploit its human, social, and material resources to its own advantage relative to its environment and other groups or cultures.
That was
I highlighted that last part.
this like that was deep. He's telling us here that, if you look at the groups, right, that exploit us or dominate us, Dr. Amos Wilson is saying they have superior organization of family kinship and communal groups and resources.
Right.
And he says a culture generates effective power when it aligns its subcultural, we're talking about the subcultural units. So that means the individuals, that means the families, that means the community, right? He said, especially the family community units in such a way that they can most effectively create and exploit its human, social, and material resources to its own advantage relative to its environment, other groups. So basically, if we empower the individuals, right, and you empower the family, you empower the community, that's when the whole culture, and he said that it has to be aligned. So the culture has to be aligned. The culture of the collective has to be aligned with the culture of the family and the individuals. And the only way, Sister Alima, in my opinion, for that to happen is when we begin to educate and socialize our own. Remember, your education also transmits culture. So we got to be mindful that when we send our babies, and this is no diss to people who send their children to public school. All of my children matriculated through public school, and my youngest is now in public school, and I'm trying to organize my schedule and resources such that I'm able to homeschool them. That's the end goal. But some of us can't homeschool, or some of us, don't have those resources, to do so. But we have to be mindful that when we send our children into the American education system to be educated, right? When we send them into that system, we got to remember that it's also transmitting culture, American culture. So your children are being acculturated as they are attending these public schools. So we got to keep that in mind.
Dr. Maat.
Yes.
I was thinking about reflecting on what you were saying early on on page 58, when you talked about the very thing you talked about, true political power. Organizations began with the development of power relationships between family and kinship.
That's right.
I didn't lock in something that he really tied in, is that the breakdown of our organizations and our inability to create organizations, it starts with the family, because when you have the dysfunction there, you know what I mean? They don't have the development to function as an organization. We don't have the social skills that weren't developed early on as children and adolescents to move into what we're talking about as an organization.
Exactly.
You know, I didn't see that at first, you know, but he really opened my eyes about that.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
I agree with him. And what this says to me, especially that last paragraph, was saying that, you know, it's okay to thrive as an individual, but as a family unit, in order to be a successful family unit and to create generational wealth, then you have to pull those resources together. And we have been inculcated with the ideas that I'm gonna do for me and then you do for you, even if we are blood. Like, I might just help you out if you need a little bit of help every now and then. But as far as us getting a big house and all living together and pooling our resources together and saving our money and opening a business, that's too much. Like, you're in my space, you know? So that's what that definitely said to me, family.
Right. Well, selfishness is definitely encouraged in the system, you know.
I agree, sis. Okay, well, moving on to Black American culture and identity, he poses the question, and it says that what is culture? And Horton and Hunt provide an answer, and they say that from their life experiences, a group develops a set of rules and procedures for meeting their needs. The set of rules and procedures together with supporting set of ideas and values is called the culture. So they're saying that your culture derives from what it is that you needed to do to set up your community, and what worked, what didn't work, the guidelines that you set, the rules that you set, the values that you adopted. That in essence is what becomes your culture. And that also said to me, well, then it's easy to adopt someone else's culture, because as you already said, culture is adaptive to depending on where you are. Next paragraph I had highlighted, it says a culture provides standards of proper cognitive, emotional, and behavioral conduct, a set of proverbial precepts as to what reality is, and an accompanying set of rationalizations or ostensible explanations for its nature and its purpose, which also was interesting, because if you adopt someone else's culture, then you therefore adopt their emotional, their behavior, conduct, the way they see reality, etc.
Yes.
etc. So I just thought that that was very profound. Anybody, y'all can jump in whenever you want, because I had just about this whole thing highlighted because I thought it was neat.
Keep going, sis, because I had a lot of stuff, I had a lot of things highlighted myself. You know, what just really stuck out is that culture is, you know, like he said, it's rules, it's procedures for meeting your needs, it's designs for living. You know what I mean? Keep going, sis. Keep going.
He said cultural constructs, definitions, meanings, and purposes. These cultural constructs are used to proactively and reactively mold the mind, body, spirit, and behavior of the constituent members of a culture. These active constructs become the cultural and social heritage of the members of a particular culture. Hence, culture does not exist outside and independent of its human subjects.
And given that definition of culture, it can be easily argued that Black people, that we today, Black folks, that we have adopted a culture, so when we say that, we're saying rules and procedures for meeting our needs, designs for living. We have a culture, Black people, I'm not even gonna say that we have adopted a culture, but we have a culture that isn't contributive, that isn't conducive to our advancement. And that's period. We don't. And I love how he goes on to define, Sister Alima, what is Black culture? Because a lot of people say, I've seen people pose that question on Facebook. You have some people who say, well, Black people don't have any culture, you know, and then you have some people who say, well, we do have culture.
Yes.
You know, I love how Dr. Amos Wilson goes on to define Black culture. Because somebody read that definition. I'm busy highlighting some stuff. But he defines Black culture on page 61. Oh, no, before we go there, it's on page 61. It's the first paragraph, and it says Black American culture. I want someone to read that. But I do want to add to what Sister Alima said, and she already kind of skipped ahead to page 60, when she said that if culture is adaptive, then that means that you can adopt someone else's culture. Well, Dr. Amos Wilson talks about that on page 60 at the bottom, where he says he talks about culture or cultural identity being a social product. And he talks about how you can adopt someone else's culture through socialization. And he defines socialization at the bottom of the page as, now granted, now he's speaking about socialization in the context of a dominant group and a subordinate group. Because the definition,
since you're jumping too far, can you read where he talks about mentally and socially about culture? Can you touch on those?
Oh, before I get into socialization? No, you go ahead. You go to that one. I
had highlighted, he broke down mentally and socially what culture is. And he says mentally, culture involves the socially shared and customary ways of thinking, a way of encoding, perceiving, experiencing, ordering, processing, communicating, and a behavior expressing information, which distinguishes one culture group from another. He says socially, culture patterns the way its members perceive each other, relate to and interact with each other. It facilitates the way they create, develop, organize, institutionalize, and behaviorally apply their human potential in order to adapt to the conditions under which they live, so to satisfy their psychological, social, and survival needs. And that stuck out to me because if we are not doing so well mentally and socially, then it says to me that we have adapted this way in a way to survive under oppressive conditions. So I just thought that stuck out in a sense. But if you could continue on if you wanted to about socialization.
Okay, hold on. Yeah, because I think that I had, hold on, sis, because I underline a lot of stuff and I go back through and I highlight it when we have our, I go back through and kind of like highlight it when we meet. So hold on, I had two more lines.
Okay, he says that culture to a significant extent is a historical product and a social product.
Right.
Culture is socially manufactured. The handiwork of both deliberate and coincidental human social collusions and interactions. Culture also manufactures social products. Some of the most important social products it generates includes its own cultural identity and the social and personal identities of its constituent group and individual members. So it says culture is socialization. Culture is socially manufactured. Interesting.
It's socially, but that makes sense though, Sister Alima.
It does.
Socially manufactured. You know what I mean? Like if we're in an environment and we're trying to, because remember, culture is produced by the environment, right? It's behaviors, ideas, beliefs, and values that will permit us to survive and thrive in the environment, right? And so to say that it's a social product, I mean, it definitely makes sense, right? I mean, it definitely makes sense. And then he also said it's a historical product, right? He said it's a historical product and a social product. And then earlier today, and I wanted to touch on this, earlier today, Sister Alima, you said, you were just talking about culture, and based on his definition, you inferred that since it's adaptive, you said, well, that means that I can be acculturated, or I can take on somebody else's culture. And Dr. Amos Wilson, he concurs completely with you, because at the bottom of page 60, he says, through the socialization process, take on another person's culture. And he's defining socialization here in the context of a dominant group and a subordinate group, right? But we know that the definition of culture is just a process by which an infant or person acquires habits, right? Habits, you know, and behaviors and characteristics and traits, right? That's of the society, right? Or because of, you know, their social interactions and experiences. That's the general definition, but he gives a definition in terms of a subordinate group and dominant group. So here he says, socialization process, a process in which new responses, values, perspectives, and orientations are acquired, and existing behavior repertoires of the individual or group are modified to some extent as the result of his or its subjection to direct or indirect social conditioning experiences. So that's the definition. So he's saying that you can adopt new values, new beliefs, and new perspectives and orientations, you know, based on you being subjected to someone else, especially if that someone else is dominant, more dominating, right? Is more dominant. And so then he says, can a culture be socialized, right, Alima? Can a culture be socialized?
Yes.
And the answer is yes, because someone read that definition of Black American culture on page 61, first paragraph, as I go.
I have it highlighted.
Okay.
Black American culture, in large part, is the socialized product of historical and power relations between white and Black Americans. Black American cultural identity, while riddled with indigenous African cultural elements, residuals, and fundaments, is still an amalgamated product of American experience, conditioned by dominant whites who do not have the best interests of Blacks in mind or at heart. Yes.
It's an amalgamation of.
Well, that's social engineering. That's, you know,
Social engineering.
what we're
absolutely
dealing with.
Absolutely.
You know, the things that are in our music, how they're taking over the music and they control the topic. You know, so instead of being about, you know, empowerment, it's about this whole way of socializing people and using propaganda. You're making them think you're giving them something by giving these artists a lot of money, but you're using them as a tool to disseminate a certain type of information.
Absolutely.
You know.
Absolutely.
Considering that we've been so controlled here since we've been brought here, it would only make sense that Black culture is an amalgamated product of our experiences here, because even our culture, to a sense, is controlled. That's why they say it is riddled, so sprinkled possibly with indigenous African cultural elements, but it's to what's allowed to a certain extent, just like the Black church. But of course, we'll get into that.
Right, and what I like about when Dr. Amos Wilson is going to move into is that individualism was created for us.
Yes.
This is what he's going to show. He's going to show how that they actually function as a group, as white people, but they perpetuate individualism to us to keep us disempowered.
Yes, yes,
Right.
yes.
Yeah, the things that they push on us, they don't practice as a society.
Right.
That's right.
That's right.
They
They know
just
that
throw
it's detrimental. They know it's detrimental, and so they're not going to do things that are detrimental, but of course they want us to.
right, because a lot of us don't understand the systems that we're under, what we're dealing with, and why, you know, certain things in a larger society aimed at us, you know, via TV and things like that.
That's right. And the next paragraph says that the socialization of a subordinate culture involves the inculcation of its young with values and attitudes that serve to perpetuate the dominant social system. And that makes sense. If you want to control a system, especially a group of people, you definitely start with the babies. You
Come
put
on.
in mind of the babies because they're going to grow up to be the adults who are going to raise the next babies.
Yes.
Right.
So that makes perfect.
Yes, it does.
That makes perfect sense.
It's Alima. So now, like, you know, when I read this, I'm like, man, you know, this is why I fight for, you know, molding, being the primary, you know, and dominant. We have to become the primary and dominant molders and shapers of our children's mind. We have to. And so that's why I'm a huge proponent for African-centered education. That's why I am a huge proponent for African-centered books, African-centered cartoons. And wait a minute, let me show you guys something. Sister Alima, this is like totally, I didn't even expect to show you guys this. This is my son. We're working on a little project. Let me show you guys something. Let me show you guys something. Training up our young. This is what's in my baby's library, right? The Encyclopedia of African American Heritage. Queen Nzinga. Learning Swahili. Rosa Parks. Tell Me Who I Am workbooks. Swahili workbooks for him to learn about Swahili, colors and shapes and letters. So learning an indigenous tongue. Aaron Knows About Africa. All right, get this book. Aaron Knows About. Okay, honey, look at him. He just want to say hi. Say hi, honey.
Hi.
All right, I'm in the study group. Look, Ada B. Wells. Okay, keep very much. Ada B. Wells. Who else? Sojourner Truth. Keep going, honey. Jomo Kenyatta. Keep going.
Yeah, go ahead.
Keep going, honey. Who?
Marcus Garvey.
Marcus Garvey. Keep going.
George Washington Carver.
George Washington Carver. Imhotep Learning Concepts.
And Boo Boo.
And a book called Boo Boo by brother Albert Smith. He's on Facebook as well. So I didn't expect to show you guys this. Say bye-bye, honey. All right. So I didn't expect to show you guys this, but we're working on a little project and we're gathering all of his African-centered material. So like, as you said, Sister Alima, when you want to socialize, you know, the community, or you want to socialize, you know, a subordinate group, you have to captivate and mold and shape the minds of the baby. So that's why it's important as Black people, as African people, that we erect our own educational institutions, that we have our own media for our babies, our own books, that we create and produce our own books, our own movies and films, our own literature, just whatever, you know what I mean, to educate our babies. We have to be in control of that. Otherwise, we'll have somebody, again, socially engineering us. Hello?
Yes.
All right, we still here.
Let's move on.
All right, moving on with socialization. We're still talking about socialization. They have referenced Dagger here towards the end, and Dagger contends that socialization process is facilitated by a process called identification. He defines identification as the process by which the infant, and in present context of discussion, the subordinate Black culture, becomes or behaves like some other or others, and or like others. Expect the final three words in this statement are particularly proposed to oppressed Blacks. It involves psychological processes and includes motives, both conscious and unconscious. So they're saying that the identification process is a process in which everyone, well, the subordinate culture, basically, they would be talking about Black culture, in which we begin to behave like our oppressors. And I would say that, well, of course, we have definitely been in the process of identification since we've been here.
Absolutely.
He also goes over to say that, moreover, identification involves the process by which the individual or group is socialized to acquire those attitudes, values, interests, morals, ethics, tastes, skills, emotional and behavioral tendencies, and ways of thinking that the socializer deems appropriate to the person's gender, the person's, or in this case of whites and Blacks, the group's race and social role. In other words, identification refers to the process of fitting a person or group to its ascribed or prescribed social role. So it sounds like they're saying that we're all molded to become what they feel that we should become within this society.
Yes.
Interesting. And you look at the early colleges, Black colleges. I was thinking about with this here, that the founding of Tuskegee, before that even Hampton. You didn't see in the development of our colleges. It did have a spirit of trying to come out of a slave mind, meaning that no skills, no ability to do for self. I understood what Mr. Washington was doing there. But far as our African culture, we dressed in the genteel type style. If you look at the old pictures of our people, we were totally emulating their particular culture and values. You didn't see early on a lot of their the way they created the institutions to reflect a sense of Africanness, which I do understand that they had little understanding of that coming out of slavery. But that's what the missionaries did. They came to the South, a lot of the white missionaries, and they projected their values and cultures on us.
Absolutely.
I agree. I tend to find that it seems that quite naturally coming here as slaves and our identities were wiped away, and we kind of had to rebuild them. So we kind of latched on to what was being proposed as to be a good identity or good characteristics, good traits, which quite naturally there was nobody else to compare it to but white people. So it made sense that identification wise, that's who we identified with and strived to be, because we were considered to be at the bottom and they were at the top. So in a way that makes sense. And then, as you say, we didn't have a big sense of African culture because that had been lost, especially throughout the generations. So
and they was trying to recover it. and I understand that, you know, in that particular generation, they were trying to recover. You know what I mean? They came out of a vicious system of slavery, and nothing economically, politically, culturally. And so what they were trying to do as a people was to recover at that particular time, I think.
That's right. I agree.
Yes.
So then that kind of moves us into the next page on 63, where Dr. Amos Wilson talks about the need for a new African self-identity, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yes, we're going right on into that, and I actually highlighted the second paragraph when he says that he said we must no longer, through the abuse of reality, denial, and distortion, fail to recognize that our basic identities as an oppressed people are largely socially manufactured by the white-dominated American culture and its related social practices in which we as a people are immersed.
Yes.
He said these identities are therefore incarnations and instruments of their social power and are socially designed and conditioned, when activated, to unwittingly serve the political economic interests of the dominant white American to the detriment of subordinate Black culture. I can't help but to think of, you know, these identities that they manufacture. The single Black mom, you know, the single Black mom. So you have the whole world thinking that Black men are just dads, and, you know, Black women are just out here all by themselves. And I'm not saying that there aren't an element of Black women who are out here doing it by themselves. Hell, I'm a, you know, product of a single parent home. So I'm not saying that that doesn't exist, but they're making it seem, you know, I'm talking about this identity they keep pushing out, the single Black mother, the strong Black woman, you know what I mean? These identities, again, serve the political economic interests of the dominant white society, right? To have a single Black, to project that identity of a single Black parent, single Black mom, the thug, right? Go ahead, sell drugs, top lean, all of these different identities, right? That they've socially manufactured. When in actuality, if you look at each of these identities, they serve the political and economic interests of them. On our identity. So he goes on to say,
Hypersexuality.
What'd you say?
I'm saying hypersexuality is another one.
Yes, thank you.
The
hypersexual Black man, the hypersexual Black woman. Absolutely, sis. Absolutely. Absolutely. These different identities, the out of control, the loud, I mean, these different identities. And so Dr. Wilson says, you know, this is to the detriment of the subordinate Black culture. African-American cultural identity and behavioral orientations as currently defined are functionally defined to perpetuate self-negating under certain circumstances behavior in Black Americans. And I would say I shade to that.
Exactly.
Yes.
All right, I'm on 64. I'm on 64, family.
All right.
I got something highlighted.
Okay.
Anyone else? Like midway, halfway through the paragraph, it says, what kind of a culture must we construct in order to overthrow white supremacy? What kinds of social identities, relations, arrangements, alignments, institutions, values, etc., which when actualized will allow us to attain and protect our liberty, enhance our quality of life? What kinds of socialization practices must we institute in order to empower ourselves to become the kinds of people we must become if we are to secure our right to be free? Certainly the answers lie in the direction of the reclamation of our African identity and the reconstruction of our African-centered consciousness, supported by commensurate African-centered cultural, social, political, and economic institutions and relations. So, I mean, for me, it's just getting back to, you know, it being about us and working and understanding, you know, and kind of forging ahead and forging a new identity that's devoid of the pathologies, and being able to recognize the pathologies that we've, what has been forced on us as far as social engineering, you know, and thinking as, you know, our cultures, we have to, like, to me, like.
Right, and going back home.
Yeah, exactly. You know, using what was once before that worked for us before our interruption.
Absolutely.
It's like we need a power wash. We need to, like a restart button. You know what I mean? And just start over.
That's right.
And to clean the thinking in the minds, because people have been so, people have been thinking this way and living up under this culture of white American society for so long that I wonder if just starting the way we are would be good. It's like we would need some type of system, some type of system that dedicates itself to teach people the way that Africans think, because I don't even know if we know in actuality how Africans think, because we don't think like Africans.
You know what is the teaching?
Well, I mean, a lot of them don't either, because you got white supremacy in Africa, you know.
Oh yeah, well I'm talking, I mean, well, you know, I understand all that. But I mean, in the way traditionally and culturally Africans think, because even I can tell you right now that I've been to the continent several times, and no matter how much white supremacy is there, the culture is not the same. It's not. They don't think like Black Americans think. They don't. I promise you.
Oh no, I've been there. I've been there several times myself, so that's why I'm saying that. Definitely.
The ancestors had less. Hello.
What did you say, brother? What did you say, brother Andre? Let me hear from you, brother. What did you say?
Okay, I said the ancestors have left us a lot of information, left us awesome blueprints to work with.
Yes.
So we do have that information, as the sister was saying. I think it's a matter of us here on this continent really coming together and being somewhat on one accord. No, let me rephrase that. Not somewhat, but totally being on one accord. Having groups like this definitely helps. I wanted to add something too, real quick, from one of our other scholars. She said that environment determines culture, and culture determines consciousness, and then consciousness creates your worldview. And I think I know what happened to us when we came here. We were taken from our environment, which distorted our culture and caused us to adopt a whole nother alien culture. And no matter how much we try to embrace this culture, this European psychotic culture, it just doesn't fit with our DNA. Y'all feel what I'm saying?
Yes.
So, and it's messing with our consciousness.
That was.
I hear exactly what you said, brother.
Yes. Yes.
I hear exactly what you're saying. It doesn't fit with our essence of who we are.
That's right.
It doesn't. It doesn't.
That's why we self-destruct.
That's right, Queen.
Yes.
And so it's kind of like you said, Sister Alima, we need institutions that will transmit consciousness. Dr. Naeem Akbar, in his book, Know Thyself, he talks about that. He said that, you know, that was one of the most clever things that the European did on this soil, was to erect educational institutions that transmitted their consciousness. So we need to erect or produce educational institutions that transmit an African consciousness. So again, now we're 2, I want to say 2-0. When we send our children to school, we got to remember that they're being acculturated, right? And we also had to remember that a consciousness is being transmitted. So a Eurocentric consciousness is being transmitted when they go to these institutions. So let's move on. I think that was page 64. At the bottom of page 64, we go into another section called the destruction of the Black family. Earlier in the chapter, Dr. Amos Wilson defined a family as a power system. He defined a family as an organization, right? An organization that aggregates its resources together to achieve its vital goals. And then he lists all of the different vital goals: reproduction, food, clothing, and shelter, economics. So he talked about all of that. And he's saying in this paragraph, I'm looking at the second paragraph where it says dominant groups. Dominant groups seeking to achieve or maintain their power over subordinate groups are for this reason compelled in some ways to constrain, restrict, reduce, destabilize, misdirect, or destroy the family systems. And with those, the communal, because remember, everything is built in the family system. So if I take the family system out, right, then I can destroy the community, I can destroy the race, right? So that's why Dr. Amos says, well, Dr. Amos Wilson says, and with those, the communal and cultural systems of the groups, they subordinate. The oppression, distortion, and destabilization of the African family by dominant white America began with the enslavement of Africans, and it continues to this day. So he's saying that if you want to destroy your people,
Right.
family unit, because he understands that the family unit or the family units are the building blocks of any nation, of any society, of any community. So if you destroy it, it's like someone pulled the ground right under you, right? Someone pulled the ground right from under you, you will fall. So, you know, destroy your nation. If you want to destroy your nation, you destroy the family. And he's saying that it was slavery that destroyed the family. Now, I remember hearing this argument. I was going back and forth with Tommy. I was on his platform twice. And I remember he said, well, y'all keep saying that slavery, destroyed the black family. Well, the black family was intact until the 1960s. It says that prior to the 1960s, 81% of African-American households were headed by married couples. And after, I think the 1960s or 70s, that declined to what it is now, which is 27% of African-American households being led by married couples. So then the question is, or was, what happened, right? So he was saying, well, the family was intact from 1960, 1970, or through the days of slavery all the way to the 1960s. But after the 1960s and 1970s, that number dropped. But then the question, and this is based off of what I read for Blueprint for Black Power, did we really have a black family? I mean, surely you had the mom and dad in the household, but did we really function as a family? We didn't function as a family, we functioned as an oppressed family. And that's what Dr. Wilson said. So even though it was there, mama and papa probably was there, but did we really function as a family? We're working from can't see to can't see, right? The children, the mom and dad had no power or authority over their children. Their children could be sold. Hell, the mother could be sold. The father could be sold. The woman could be, taken away in the middle of the night to go have sex with the master. I mean, all of these different things they dealt with. So did we really function as a family? Then at the emancipation, we had Reconstruction, but then we went right into the Jim Crow era. Then from the Jim Crow era, we went into the Civil Rights era. So when was the black man and woman here in America really able to have a family? I mean, I don't mean to be passionate about this, just a Lima, but when did we really have a family? So Dr. Wilson goes into that. He says, although during, and I'm at the bottom paragraph of page 64, he says, although during and after emancipation, the black family outwardly resembled that of the white family, functionally, psychosocially, and social-economically, it was and is distinctly different. The main difference is that it was and is a family under oppression. So then he goes into the description of the slave family, and he said, today, our family still function and fits the modern black family. So what does he say on page 65? And I have these things highlighted. I'm not going to read the first page. I'm just pulling out the points. He says the slave woman was first a full-time worker for her owner, and only incidentally a wife, mother, and homemaker. He said that happened incidentally. And he said that she worked for her owner. Just like most of us go out here as black women, we work in 12, 13, 14 hours, right? At a company that's not owned and operated by our families. Then he says, in the second paragraph, he says, in an age of patriarchal families, the male slave's only crucial function within the family was that of searing offspring. That was it. He was a baby maker. He was a worker and a baby maker.
That's right. That's right.
It says the husband was at most his wife's assistant, her companion, or her sex partner. He was often thought of as her possession, as was the cabin in which they lived. It was common for a mother and her children to be considered a family without reference to the father. There go your single.
What can we say about that today?
It's still the same way today. It's still the same way today.
Yes. Absolutely. Yes. And it says that slave families were highly unstable. And so the argument is, were we really a family? Yeah, mom and dad were there, maybe, if they didn't get sold, right? But did we really function as a family? The man had no power. He had no power. The woman working from can't see to can't see, so she can't be there to properly nurture her babies the way she would like to, so that we really function as a family. I think probably in the 1960s, 1970s, Black people said, I'm tired. We probably got tired, Sister Alima. You know what I mean? We got tired. And so on page 67, okay, page 67, and I thought that this was very powerful. I was watching a video, an interview of Dr. Boyce Watkins. He was on the Paul Newman show. I think it's called the Newman show out in DC. And he was saying that the rise of the black nation, the rise of the Black race will rise in conjunction with the rise of the Black man. That's what he said. So he said, if you can cripple the Black man, then you leave the women and the children vulnerable, right? So let's see what Dr. Wilson has to say. Dr. Wilson backed Dr. Boyce Watkins up 100% with this. On page 66, I'm at the bottom paragraph.
Okay.
Well, last paragraph, and I'm towards the bottom of that paragraph. The disempowerment of the African male, all right? The African family and culture virtually assures continuing African-American powerlessness and economic exploitations by other ethnic groups. So you got to disempower the man, you got to break down the family, right? And you got to break down the culture, okay? Yeah. So the groups that exploit the African-American community most expertly are patriarchal and male-headed. Groups whose family structures are relatively stable and well-organized are political economic systems and whose sense of ethnicity, of tribe, ethnocentrism are strong and enduring. You want me to keep going, sis?
Yeah, that's what I had right there. That's what I had. When then I also went on, generally these groups are proud of their differences from the mainstream white culture, do not resent their residential separation from whites, and are not seeking to commit biological suicide by miscegenation or intermarriage with whites to such an extent that their racial stock disappears. Now, I thought that was deep, because that a lot of cultures, they understand the importance of family, and they understand that family is a power system, so they're not willing to intermingle and intermix and marry and all that stuff with whites, because they understand that it takes away from their own power within their social system, which is their.
Absolutely, I had that.
And it's funny because white people, you know, for the most part, they stress, like my mother always told me, they don't necessarily stress love when getting married. They stress finances and they stress stability. But, you know, on the other hand, Black culture, we stress love, and, you know, because we don't look at getting married as like another elevation to the family structure. We don't look at it that way. Like, we're bringing two things together. We're bringing two families together that is going to help to benefit or take us to the next level. But that's how white people think. They think generationally.
Right.
Is it me, or if I'm going crazy, but every commercial I see on TV is never two Black couples. It's always an interracial couple. You know, a white male with a Black woman, or vice versa. You never see us as a unit or a family in any commercials typically.
That's right. They don't show that. They don't show that anymore. It's very rare. Very rare, brother.
And then, and Dr. Amos Wilson speaks to that. He speaks to that. He says, while not the whole African American community exhibit these sentiments, he said probably not even the large majority. He said relatively a small but influential segment does. He said this segment is overrepresented in the Black community, right? And it is overrepresented, like you said, in commercials. We see people in leadership positions, as he said, in organizations. We see people who are celebrities and stars, right? And we see them, you know, assimilating and integrating with. And Dr. Amos Wilson is saying that, you know, even though it may be not a large majority of us that are doing this, he's saying the people who are overly represented. And like the brother Travis said, you know, you see them in commercials, you see them in movies. You know, you go to the store and you go shopping, and they're on advertisement on the packaging of certain products. You know, and so he's saying these things are overrepresented. They're in your face. You know, and so I just wanted to kind of add that, brother Travis, to what you were saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, this segment. So then he goes on. I love how he concludes this section, and I would love to read that, or if someone could read the last paragraph on page 67 of the section. I actually have stars.
Where it says the Black family?
Absolutely, sis.
the Black family as long as and to the degree to which it is dependent on the dominant white power structure, to the degree to which it is not founded on African-centered consciousness, cultural traditions and values, social economic arrangements or alignments, its organization and disorganization, stability and instability, power or powerlessness, will reactionarily reflect the political, economic interests of the white power structure in which it is operationally embedded. And these interests are, more often than not, detrimental to those of the Black family. The relative powerlessness of the Black family portends the relative impotency of Black culture and vice versa.
Powerful.
Saying that as long as we continue to live and operate under the confines of white society and white structure, that we're going to always be powerless. Always. No getting around it.
All right, let me see. So then we're moving in, y'all. We really combing through, man. We normally, I think this might be under 2 hours this week, but we're combing through, and this is a bit of a long. This is actually a long chapter, but I gotta be honest. This is probably like the best discussion. Everyone. I'm just really feeling the vibes. I'm loving the dialogue.
Yes.
So he's moving into another section where he's talking about religious institutions and power. And so, he went in. I can't lie, Sister Alima. I was like, I wanted to, I got my auntie. She's a devout Christian. She's reading the book. My cousin, she's jumped out of Christianity. She's reading. But when I say he went in on the Black church,
yes, he did.
I know Sister Camille liked it.
He went in on the Black church. So he said,
but you know what I find? The same thing in Orthodox Islam. I was in Orthodox Islam for many years, and I find the same principles in Orthodox Islam. Many of the same principles. As opposed to white domination, the Arab domination, meaning that you see as the hierarchy is the Arab. They still point to the Arab. I'm talking about not the Nation of Islam, of course, but the Orthodox format. It perpetuates the same way.
Yes, it does. All right.
Absolutely. So he starts off, he says, a people's culture is a mental behavioral system, right? Because remember earlier in the chapter, he defined culture as like the set of rules, procedures,
moral values,
patterns. So he calls it a mental behavior system used by them to rationalize and justify, organize and regulate, give meaning and purpose to their individual and group behavior, social relations, lives, and existence. He said culture is essentially a way of thinking, perceiving, evaluating, and interpreting the world, a way of relating to others and to the physical, metaphysical world, and involves an explicit and implicit set of rules of conduct, which orders the overall social relations, arrangements, and attitudes. So then he said the power, Let me see, I know I had that underlined. Okay, now I'm on page 68. So now the center of a culture's guiding mental behavior system, he said, is its moral, religious, ethical system.
Go ahead, sis.
So he said that is its attitudes concerning right or wrong, feelings and conduct, its acknowledgement of a God, a divine, preeminent, cosmic, or universal principles, and a related systems of beliefs, faith, and worship, ritual and practical piety, as well as a doctrine or system of moral philosophy and a code of moral behavior precepts. So he says that the religious system of a society, it serves as its fundamental power system, or at least one of its most influential systems of power. So that's what the religious system should be, right? It should be a power system. That's right. And it should be an influential center of power. And I remember having a conversation with my mother, and I asked her, I said, how has Christianity empowered Black people? How has it empowered people? Because your religious or your spiritual system should empower you. We've been subjected to Christianity. And I mean, if I offend people who are watching this, you just gotta, I understand. but we've been practicing this spiritual system for hundreds of years. And look at the condition of our people. Has it empowered us? And we're at a point, if the ideology or theology that we're practicing does not empower us, then it's time to throw it away. It's time to throw it away and reform, because we need to adopt an ideology and a spiritual system that will empower us as a people. And Dr. Amos Wilson argues, you know, in the next several pages, that our current spiritual system, or Christianity, a lot of us, some people practice Islam, some people practice Christian, but he's talking about Christianity, and he's saying that Christianity has de-empowered the Black community. So let's get into that.
Yes.
So let's get into that. Page 68, the institutional Black church. I'm gonna be honest with you guys. I didn't highlight anything on this page because a lot of this stuff I already knew, I already thought. But if you got anything highlighted on this page, please feel free to share.
Only thing I had put with the summary, basically, he says that the foundation of Black ministerial power, influence, and leadership in the African American.
Where are you, Sister Alima?
Page 68 towards the bottom. He says, however, the foundation of Black ministerial power, influence, and leadership in the African American community is in largest part due to the custodial control of the key cultural institution, the institutional Black church, the use of institutional Christian theology, ideology, doctrine, dogma, and ritual by Black preachers, their own divinity as God's representatives on earth, and their ministering to the centrally important spiritual, supernatural needs of their congregations. So I think we all pretty much knew that, but you know, they're saying that, of course, they are allowed. They're giving a certain theology that they have to teach, you know, and so that in power is what they teach.
Right.
I thought it was interesting that they called them their own divinity as God's representatives, because you know their preachers think they're just, you know, you can't tell them that they're not just one step under the Creator. So I thought
so the church is basically an institution to manage and maintain white supremacy.
Yes.
Basically.
Got it.
Yes. Yes, brother.
Social engineer Black people.
Right. Through religion. Top of page 69, family. Therefore, the theological, ideological rationales which undergird the legitimacy, power, and direction of the Black preacher establishment and its leadership of the African American community must be critically analyzed if we are to understand the relative potency and impotency of Black American culture. The Black church has not only underdeveloped the power potential of the Black community, but has actually squandered its potential, impaired it, and prostituted it in service to alien peoples and cultures, particularly white peoples and Eurocentric culture. The lies in the nature of the imposed, borrowed, theological, ideological rationale which undergirds the Black church and which guides the perceptions, expectations, social relations, and behaviors of its leadership.
Hold up. Wow. So hold up. And then I love in the next paragraph, he said, you must keep in mind that the enslaved Africans were not Christian.
Yeah.
I remember posing the question to members. I said, how can you worship the God of your oppressors? You know, when you ask them that question, they get stumped. And the question becomes, well, what were we worshiping before then? I say, your deity. Your deity. You had your own spiritual system. You know, and I try to make that clear because they act as if enslaved Africans didn't have a spiritual system. Like we had no moral codes. Like we had, you know, I think a lot of us, because we've been miseducated, we believe that, oh my goodness, that when the white man came and got us and enslaved us, like that was the best thing that happened to Black people because they had no civilizations, right? They had no civilizations. They had no religion. They had, you know, I mean, and you have Black people who really think like this. So when you say, well, look, why are you worshiping God? They're like, well, what were we worshiping before then? As if we didn't have our own spiritual systems. And that is a consequence of miseducation. Go ahead, Sister Camille.
I was going to say a lot of pastors preach that kind of thing. You know,
yes, they do.
Without Jesus Christ, we wouldn't have came through slavery and and that Africans worship multiple gods, and it's just a whole bunch of nonsense and miseducation. And they also say that they're not African. They are another group of, so that's also the disconnect, you know, they've been taught be ashamed of Africa, you know, and they preach that in the pulpit. You know, there's only a few of them that are African centered. The overall majority of them are ignorant, and they are like what I call they like excitement. So they'll say a lot of stuff is nonsense. They just able to get the people hyped up and crying and falling all over the chairs and all that kind of stuff. But there's really no type of any type of content or as developing as a group
Absolutely.
You know, it's just a whole bunch of, you know, so they can get more money out of poor people. You know, the churches, instead of it's up on Friday and Saturday, you come to the church and spend your money, and they got music going on and people whooping and hollering and crying. They don't even identify. The pastors are so uneducated.
Oh yeah,
the information that they're giving to people is just ludicrous.
I say that all the time, sis. How undereducated they are.
Also preach that, you know, when you talk about Kemet, or as they know in Egypt, they say, well, the Egyptians had slaves. I'm like, man, that's the Bible story. Y'all are crazy, but that's not even true.
Right.
Then they look at me in sheer wonderment, like, huh? They also believe that all those stories and things in the Bible are true, and that these people actually existed. So it's like a whole cloud of just misinformation and untruths.
Facts, Queen. Where are we? Still on 69, sis?
No, I'm going to page 70, but
sis, hold on, wait. Sis, you jumping too quick.
Oh, I'm sorry, my bad.
Hold on, wait. I just wanted to read this real quick. Just for the Christians who didn't know, it says that on 69 family, towards the middle of the last paragraph, it says, obviously the masters taught the slaves Christianity for their own conscious and unconscious self-serving reasons. The theology they passed on their slaves was necessarily biased in order to serve and justify their dominance. Therefore, in essential ways, the theology which undergirds the practice and outcome of white Christianity was distinctly different from that which undergirds black Christianity. So during slavery times, the slaves were only allowed, they touched a lot of passages were taken out of the Bible. And they were only allowed to practice and preach on certain aspects of the Bible because they didn't want to teach them aspects of the Bible that taught about fighting back and, you know, taking up for yourself. And because those aspects actually do exist in the Bible, but they just taught them the docile parts of the Bible in order to keep them, you know, in control. And it made me think about when I used to be in church and they just preached about the same things over and over. They never preached anything to empower you or to have you thinking differently. It was pretty much just to keep you in the flow of things so you can come back to church next Sunday and put your money back in the plate. So it's all about control. But sis, I just wanted to point that out.
Absolutely, and that was a great point, Sister Lima. That it was about control. It wasn't about empowering you. They weren't trying to teach you who you are. And I remember my mom was saying, well, Deanna, the difference between Christianity and what you study is that, she said she did admit Christianity doesn't teach you who you are. She said, it doesn't teach you who you are. And I said, well, how can an individual be empowered if they don't know who they are?
Exactly.
That's a problem.
Right.
Like that is a problem, and then she admitted it, it doesn't teach you who you are. And I'm like, that's a problem when you practice a spiritual system that doesn't transmit your culture, that doesn't transmit your identity, that doesn't tell you, your history, your identity, your history. I teach at Morgan State University each week, and I have 4 Nigerian students there, and their names were Peter. One of them, his name was Peter. Another one's name was Ishmael, and another one's name is Peter, Ishmael, and Moses, and then one has an indigenous name. And I kept them at the class one day, and we had a talk, and I said, how is it that you brothers are from Nigeria, and your name is Peter, your name is Ishmael?
When they convert to Christianity.
Yeah, he said that. They all converted to Christianity.
Right.
And they said to me, one of them said that his dad is an ordained minister, and I was like, yeah, my mom is an ordained minister. And I said, why do you worship the white man's God? And he said the argument that the Africans have, you know, and I don't know, you know, what indigenous clan or tribe he's from, but he was saying that when he asked his father and mom that question, you know, like, why are we serving basically, you know, the white man's God or the European, you know, they know that the Europeans introduced Christianity to them. He said when he posed that question to his father, who's an ordained minister, his father responded with, well, obviously the Europeans' God was more powerful than the God that we were serving because he was able to come and colonize and enslave us, right? So that was their justification. That was their justification for converting to Christianity. They said, well, you know, the white man must have been, you know, more powerful than ours if they were able to come and do this. And I said to the brother, Moses, I said to him that now we know in 2017, it wasn't the white man's God that was more powerful than ours. It was just he had superior technology. It was the technology. It had nothing to do with the God. It was the technology, you know. And then I was talking to him about the Middle Passage, and I say, you know, how it's such an insult for us to sit here and harp on slavery in Egypt, right? The Israelites being enslaved in Egypt when your people were enslaved. You know what I mean? Your people from West Africa, they was taken from West Africa or different parts of Africa and brought to America. That's the enslavement that we should be dealing with and talking about and the effects from that, not dwelling on a bunch of Israelites who were allegedly enslaved in Egypt. And I was telling them we should be learning about our ancestors, not Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. What the hell do we as African people have to do with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? Nothing.
Yes.
So that book does not teach you who you are. It doesn't teach you about your history. It doesn't teach you about your ancestors. It doesn't teach you about your culture. It does nothing. But like Dr. Amos Wilson says on 79, he said this theology and the ethics derived therefrom function to sustain white domination, domination by other groups, and black subordination by means of inducing blacks to believe in or follow that which appears to be divine, objective, race-neutral sayings, proverbs, ethical rules, and moral preachments. However, any cursory examination of the mundane outcome of the belief in the purpose of such preachments is startling, different, and almost completely opposite for whites and blacks. So, you know, this is what he's saying. And I did kind of skip because on page 70, he talks about the black church and he says that it retarded black empowerment, you know, as much as it advanced it. And he gives a bunch of bullets, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He provides us with 6 bullets. I think you guys can read that at your leisure because it's like 8:22 and we still got, we still got like 13 pages to kind of comb through. But he gives his reasons as to why the black church has retarded the empowerment, you know, as much as it has advanced us, you know.
What page you on?
71.
That was on. Yeah. So we're on 71 now. And so he's saying that, you know, for whites, Christianity empowers whites. He said it empowers blacks, but he said that it empowers whites. He said it justifies their sense of moral superiority. Of course it would. You're looking at an image of God made in your self-image. So of course you will feel superior, right? So he's saying that it's a sense of moral superiority. It justifies and dictates their dominance of non-whites. Oh my gosh, has anyone read the Old Testament? You know, God's special people. You were meant to rule the world. I mean, this is the ideology. But a lot of people don't, a lot of blacks, we don't want to read the Old Testament. We want to jump right into the New Testament where it says God so loved the world. We want to recite John 3:16. God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. Which God are you talking about? Are you talking about the God of the New Testament? Or are you talking about the psychopath in the Old Testament? Like, who are you talking about? Because, you know, anyway, all right, I'm not going to keep on going. I mean, like the Old Testament.
Yeah, that's the one.
I mean, you know,
the Old Testament got too much, you know,
too much voodoo with him. He was the one in the Old Testament was kind of spiritual. He was kind of African sense, and then the other one, he was very white. But we're not gonna.
But this is
like, that's the watered down.
I'm like, why would you want to serve a God that started off with a special group of people, and then later on opened up him being worshipped by other people. Like, why is that cool to start off like that? Like, you really want to subscribe to a God that didn't include you in the beginning, but later on thought about including you. Like, how does that make sense? I mean, Sister Lima, tell me, does that make sense? This God only had a special group of people that he designated to rule the world. He allowed them to go around and kill everybody, right? And take over their land, rape their women. He allowed them to do everything they wanted to do. And then later on, he said, you know what? I'll send my son, and I'm going to allow everyone to love. Like, who subscribes to a doctrine like this? I'm like, is it
powerful?
I'm like, is it just what you say, Brother Andre?
You said that's powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, that was exclusive initially, and then all of a sudden he wanted to be, communal. Like, are you crazy? Anyway, let me finish.
So let's tell us how Christianity does for blacks, sis. Let us know.
Let me see. Okay, so we talked about how it empowered white folks. Okay, so before I get there, sis, he's talking about, I didn't finish that paragraph. He was just saying that it empowers white folks. They have a God, they worship a God whose image bears their likeness. Mm-hmm. It provides a rationale for their racial self-centeredness, selfishness, and exclusivity by combining the practice of brotherly love and quality and self-sacrifice and the like within the borders of the white race. Mm-hmm. Now he says for blacks, Christianity disempowers. Yes. It induces a sense of moral inferiority, preaches submission, subordination, and obedience, is associated with material deprivation. You got people, and I'm not going to call anybody out because I know I got folks in my family that are watching it. You got people saying stuff, I don't care about anything in this world as long as I get to heaven. What? All right. It says it's associated with material deprivation. We live in a material world, Sister Alima. Like, okay, it sanctifies material discomfort and suffering. So suffering, it's like in the Black community, we look at suffering as a badge of honor. And when you complain about suffering, then the retort is, Jesus suffered, as if you are an ingrate because you don't want to suffer. So we glorify suffering. It's a badge of honor to suffer. And then we say, well, and we try to rationalize, suffering and being impoverished by comparing ourselves to Jesus, and Jesus suffered, and and look at the type of family he grew up in, so we justify and rationalize our mess. So it goes on to say that it says blah, 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 produces relatively few tangible and desirable results in this world, while emphasizing pie in the sky, other worldly rewards, promotes the worship of a God that wears a non-African face. How many of you ever been to church and heard that, I don't care what color God is. I don't care. Now you go to a white church, they have a white Jesus. They have a white Jesus. And even you go to black churches, they have a white Jesus. But then they don't have a fit. When you point out, sis, and you say, why you got that white Jesus, hanging in the, hanging on top of the pulpit, right? Over the pulpit. Then they say, well, it doesn't matter. That's when it doesn't matter.
What they say is, we don't really know what Jesus looks like. And I remember being 11 and hitting them with the question, then why is he white?
Thank you.
That's right.
You don't know what he look like. He should just be transparent or something, or put an emoji right there. If you know what he look like.
Right. Yeah, they don't get the connection.
No, they don't. And I had this underline right here.
They get the connection. They just want to worship a white deity, really subconsciously.
Tell it, brother.
Yeah.
Tell it.
Okay.
No, that's a fact. That's a fact. Subconsciously, like you say, they want to worship whites.
That's right.
Worship whites. They want to worship whites. But look, I wanted to emphasize this right here. It says, promotes the worship of a God that wears a non-African face. And I had this underline. And bears the facial image of their white dominators and enemies, leading them to consciously worship white people. Right? To think of them as more godlike than themselves, to perceive them as divinely ordained to rule over themselves, to associate whiteness of skin with all that is good, and blackness of skin with all that is bad. So that's what happens. That's what happens psychologically when you project an image of a white deity, right?
Yes.
That's what happened.
Mhm.
That's what happens. I'm moving on. Can someone go ahead and take over? I'm on page 72.
Yes, we're on 72 now.
Let's move on, sis.
Oh, yeah. The uncritical acceptance of such non-African religious precepts as universal as applying with equal effect across all groups and individuals without regard to socio-historical context or situation, without asking good for what, good for whom, evil for whom, good for whose perspective, evil for whose perspective, can become the vehicle for dominance by the group whose good, bad, good, evil precepts are accepted, and thus the vehicle for subordination by the group which accepts them.
So like basically he's saying, look, good, bad, evil, all of that, it's subjective.
Subjective.
We got to ask ourselves, when someone says it's not good, we need to question good for whom, good for what? You know,
That's right.
we got to ask some questions. You know,
Yeah.
we got to ask some questions. Keep going, sis.
Okay, next paragraph. His analysis of the use of the term good is intended to demonstrate that despite the appearance of objectivity, such a term functions subjectively in that its use is only justified from a certain perspective. So once again, what's good and what's bad and applicable to whom is dependent on the perspective of the person that's making that statement.
Facts.
Wartenberg goes on to contend that all evaluative judgments are made from the perspective of the ability of an item to fulfill its function. In fact, judgments using the term good without qualification merely conceal the fact that the term good always means good for the following end. The attribution of good, bad, or evil to human attitudes, thoughts, and behaviors fits someone's purposes, even though the judgment itself does not make reference to these purposes. These type of attributions lie at the heart of Black church theology and ideology, and at the center of the political ideology operationally accepted by the African American community, its Black church and secular leadership. Black preachers, as ardent advocates of racially biased theologies and political ideology, become the unwitting allies and mercenary surrogates for the domination and exploitation of the African community by whites and other outsiders whose theologies and ideologies they uncritically adopt. Racially biased theologies, yes. That's what they perpetuate. They perpetuate racially biased theologies. And then that's very true, because Christianity is very racially biased. Very. It tells Black people that you were put here to be slaves, that you will get your milk and honey in the afterlife. And so while you're here, put all your money in church every Sunday, live a modest life, don't ask for too much, and you will be blessed eventually.
Right. And
that's how many of us live. Like, I mean, I know I don't make that much every month. I know I don't bring much in, but I mean, as long as my lights are on, you ever heard Black people say that? As long as my rent is paid, or as long as I got some groceries, like, it doesn't matter if I can leave anything for my grandkids. It doesn't leave anything for my children. That doesn't matter. As long as my lights are paid, that mediocrity, we have that sense of mediocrity because we really feel that we're going to have something great as soon as we get to heaven. It's going to be amazing.
And and then when you close your eyes, your daggone, your progeny, you know, your successors, they're down here don't have nothing, because like you said, you were just concerned about paying a light bill. You know, you weren't concerned about creating generational wealth and also teaching your young children how to create generational wealth.
Yes.
You were worried about the light bill. You were worried about the light bill. And that's what I mean by each week, Sister Aleem. I know you hear me say this often to people, and I say this on Facebook a lot. I say Black people need to upgrade. We need to upgrade our thinking. We need to upgrade our thinking. I don't want to survive, Alima. Surviving isn't good enough for me anymore.
No, it's not.
I want to thrive.
Right.
There you go.
I want to just develop programs and goods, and so I want a system.
Yes.
So I'm thinking in terms of systems, not program development, even though we had to develop programs, but we need to upgrade our thinking.
Yes.
Program development to system building, from surviving to thriving. You know, like I tell sisters all the time, yo, don't let these dudes date you. We got to start thinking about, I see a lot of Black folks, you know, throwing baby showers, and no, we need to be talking about marriage. We need to be building families.
Yes.
Baby showers, and we need to be building Black families. So Black folks have to upgrade their thinking.
Yes.
I've been saying that for a while now. It's time to upgrade our thinking.
Yes, it is.
Keep going, Sister Lena. We are.
Next paragraph. For whites and other groups, the term bad is used to characterize the traits and behaviors of those unlike themselves and those who do not live up to their cultural ideals, expectations, which they themselves readily and shamelessly violate in interest of their self-preservation and predominance. Now, I said, now if that ain't white people, then that's white people to the T. It put me in mind of what's going on with DACA. And I'm just thinking how these white people trying to throw these Mexicans out of here talking about they not legal, but y'all ain't legal either. Never have been and never will be. So you really have the nerve to try to throw some people off some land that a third of it was theirs before you even got here, and talking about who's legalities. Like, I just think that's so hypocritical and just so hilarious to me. But it goes to say that they deviate, they decide what is good, what is bad, who can stay, who can go, because they make the rules. They set the status quo. It doesn't matter what they do, you just do what they say.
Right. Exactly. I'd like. Are you still reading, sis?
No, keep going, Queen.
Right after that, it says, for it is most interesting to note that if African Americans thought and behaved in ways judged as good, in terms of ways which facilitate their economic and social enrichment and material well-being, their ability to exploit their own economic and cultural resources, such thought and behavior on the part of blacks would be condemned by other ethnic groups as bad, reverse racism, racist, selfish, as creating racial tensions, race hatred, unchristian, and a host of other derogatory terms, the use of which in the final analysis is designed to maintain the racial, economic, political status quo, that is, maintaining blacks in positions of subordination.
That was deep.
Yeah, man, that's for me, because anytime you talk about any type of black empowerment, or, you know, like you might have like a shot with black people, you're what's that other word they use? You know, when you just want to stick to your own group. I'm like, well, that coming from you is like,
yes,
your mind, because that's all you got practice. So don't come on my, you know, I just had to just go off on some of them folks. They feel like they can just page and say crazy stuff like that. I'm like, well, that's what your culture does. I said I'm excluded. They come on in and they be like, well, we're all Americans. I said, well, we've never been treated as Americans in this country. What are you talking about? Give me an example of that, please.
That's right.
You know, and this last one, unfortunately, they would be joined in chorus by a host of Christians, their black ideological sympathizers, and black assimilationists, all unwittingly indoctrinated by imposed, borrowed, or inherited white self-serving Christian theology and political ideology, charading as divinely inspired universal precepts and expectations. Boom.
I gotta be honest with y'all. I have that whole, if y'all don't believe me, I have that whole paragraph highlighted. It says fact. Like, I mean, it was just a powerful, that was a powerful page.
So my highlighter went out, so I just put my little zigzags on the side. I mean, just the whole paragraph. I ain't got to hide them,
just that whole paragraph like this, you know. I mean, that whole paragraph. And then Dr. Amos Wilson goes into, he said, the central tendency of the black church and of the black church and of the black leadership or the black preachers, he said, is that they want to moralize the issue.
Yes.
Moral issue. He says, you're looking at worldly issues and you're saying that these worldly issues are moral issues.
That's
and
right.
You're trying to fight moral issues. You're trying to combat, you're trying to fight worldly issues, or you're trying to utilize morals and principles to fight worldly issues. You know what I'm saying? And so let me read what Baba Amos says. He said, there is one central tendency of the black church and the black preacher leadership establishment with which it has saddled the African American community, has doomed that community to one disempowering failure after another, and doomed it to unrelenting subordination and exploitation by outside groups. That is predilection to moralize every problem which confronts the black community, no matter how mundane, so no matter how worldly, He says every problem is perceived in moral terms and is perceived as solvable by moral means, right? Only. So then he quotes, he calls it the fatal flaw of the Black ministerial leadership. And he quotes, let me highlight this, the fatal flaw. I mean, the fatal flaw. So they want to moralize everything. No matter how worldly the problem is, they want to moralize. It's a moral problem.
That's true, though.
So it goes on to talk about the Southern Christian Leadership Conference that was at one point headed by Martin Luther King. He says, he says, at the King's death, you know, the SCLC, I really didn't have this highlighted. The only thing that I highlighted was the end of the paragraph where it says the economic, social, political, cultural, institutional problems of American Blacks are beyond the reach of moral preachments as King was finally forced into understanding. They don't talk about that Martin Luther King. They talk about the I Have a Dream King, and that was in 1963. But they don't tell you, and I dropped my highlighter, family. They don't tell you that in 1968, 1967, he got assassinated. I believe it was on April the 4th, 1968. But prior to his assassination, he changed his ideology. Remember, it was no longer a moral problem. You know,
That's right.
that Dr. Martin Luther King gave at the Washington Cathedral on, I believe it was March the 3rd or March the 4th, and this speech is online. And he was, in this speech, he was encouraging Black people to get their own. He was saying, well, wait a minute,
Right.
I think that we need to get our own. And then the Nation of Islam, I remember they put this information out there, and I went and I did I wanted to confirm it. They said that he wrote a letter to Harry Belafonte, and he said, look, man, I feel like I made a mistake. I feel like we integrated into a burning house.
That's right.
That's right.
Never learn about this Martin Luther King. You know, we learn about the I Have a Dream that one day my son and daughter can play with your son and daughter, and people won't be judged. The la-di-da-di-da-di-da-di, everybody, you know, spill. But we don't talk about the Martin Luther King that evolved since the I Have a Dream speech.
And even the Martin Luther King that at the present time, I think he gets a bad rap in the conscious community as somehow like he was some type of like he was trying to assimilate, you know what I mean, or coon out, so to speak. When in actuality, what he was really fighting for was equal rights.
Right.
So equal rights to a certain extent did include integration. So I mean, if I want to be able to use the same bathroom as your kid, then we're going to have to integrate. We're probably going to be doing things together. I just want to throw that out there, that I just think he gets a bad rep in his community.
I agree.
I notice when his birthday comes around, people don't acknowledge him. You know, it's just really disrespectful, as if he did something so wrong. He did what he knew was best to do that he could. And no one talks about the fact that even though he switched up his mindset towards the end, how Malcolm X suddenly became a we are the world, one love, I love everybody type of guy. And no one talks about that. You know what I'm saying?
That's a good point. That's a good point.
It is.
And I just had to throw that out there, you know, because just to defend Baba King, because he just
and he did confront white supremacy on a systematic level.
Yes,
he had a program to confront white supremacy, and he confronted that. Now, my position is more with Malcolm, the Pan-African Malcolm. You know, I agree more so with Malcolm from his Pan-African perspective. And most people don't know Alex Haley edited a lot of information dealing with Pan-Africanism when he met with Nkrumah and all of that. A lot of that was edited out of the autobiography. A lawyer in Detroit has the chapters that Alex Haley removed from the actual book that deals with him more so dealing with Pan-Africanism and his trips to Africa. Malcolm's position became strongly Pan-African, but you know, a lot of I agree with the sister. A lot of people do discredit Martin Luther King, but he did confront white supremacy.
Yes, he did.
I would like to add to that. You know, that I Have a Dream speech. That's the end of the speech. You know, and that's the part that the white society likes to promote. But during that speech, he spoke about a whole lot of things that needed to happen for Black people, for that particular thing to even take place. You know, they just skip. They kind of pick and choose.
Yes.
because what they did was to even give him a holiday, they had to make him palatable for white people. So by saying, you know, wow, what's the end of that speech? Little, you know, like, so what they've done is they've made his intentions that were solely for black people. They've taken it and made it something for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's how they've kind of flipped it, and that's not really what he was about. He was also about reparations. You know, he has that whole reparations speech too. Like we come
right.
each time we go to Washington, we coming for our check. You know,
That's right.
And
I think a lot of people.
Go ahead, brother.
I think a lot of people, especially in the conscious community, go hard on Dr. King. A lot of Jews and other Europeans that he had in his camp, helping him to write some of the speeches. And I got a lot of respect for him, but at the same time, I do have some issues with some of his programming that he did for our community. And even Dr. Wilson, Baba Wilson, spoke on it a couple of times in one of his his lectures, talking about the danger of fantasies. And he used Dr. King. He preached a message that made us fantasize about wanting to integrate soul. And he broke that thing down, talking about how that's just what it was. It was a fantasy, as if these white people were going to really accept us. And even as you brought it out at the beginning of our lesson tonight, how they try to project this program or this culture, and we buy into it. And when we do that, we literally strip ourselves of where we come from, and we want to just assimilate like them. And no matter what we do, they will never accept us. And we continue to go crazy, you know, living in their insanity. But again, a lot of us do have respect for Dr. King. But again, hindsight is 2020. If we look back, you know, that's why him and Stokely broke off, Kwame Ture, because Kwame was like, look, man, I'm not going to be walking down the street and these folks calling me niggas and throwing rocks at me, and you talking about peace, peace, peace. You know, we got to stand. We got to fight and protect. And truth be told, nations, if we talking about Pan-Africanism, nations truly respect other nations when you draw the line and say, look, this is it. If you do this again, we coming after. You feel what I'm saying? Right. So, but when we just lay down and say, okay, love our enemy, you know, come on now. It's time. Jesus got the black community on lockdown.
We can't. Look at the doctrine that King was perpetrating. Look at the angle from which he was coming from. He was coming from a Christian angle. So quite naturally,
yeah, and that was the issue.
You know, that was the issue. That was the hindrance, and that was and which we're going to get into in a minute. That was the difference between him and Malcolm. Malcolm was with the nation and more connected with that religion, as opposed to King being connected to Christianity. And Islam and Christianity are they're very similar, but they're also very different. Because when I was a Muslim, we knew off the gate who our enemy was. So off the rip, you already know that the white man is the devil. Christianity is not going to ever say that, because they want to perpetuate that the white man is God.
You was a Nation of Islam, right? Nation of Islam?
Who, me?
Yeah, you was a Nation of Islam, or we were a little bit of everything, but definitely Nuwapians, more so towards you was with the Ansar community.
Yes, we were with Ansar Allah community.
Okay. Very good people. I know quite a few.
They was confused too.
There you go, brother.
Yeah, that's Bushwick, Brooklyn, New York.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's
okay. So y'all want to get into the Black church and the myth of individualism, because we already at 8:50, folks.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Wow.
The only thing, sis, that I wanted to we can, you're right, we can move on. The myth of individualism. Brother Travis, won't you take us into this, because you kind of hit this on the hammer. You nailed on the hammer when we talked about it at the beginning of the
Right. That's right. Okay, sister.
So we're on page 75.
75. Okay. I'm gonna read where it says the individual is perceived as independent. Okay, that's the almost at the end there. It says that into the paragraph, into that page, it says the individual is perceived as independent of, as opposed to his community, and sacrifice of individual pursuits to communal ends is perceived as unlawful usurpation of basic human and civil rights, and an imposition of individual liberty. The building of the United States, its ability to support individual freedom and self-realization, is evolution of world economic, military, cultural power. Center is not the result of independent individual pursuit of advantage, even though it may appear so. You know, it was just tying into what Sister Maya was saying earlier today, and we were talking about that. You know, that it's perceived as you know, it's sold to us as a package of, you know, be individual, you know, pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, you know, get a good education, and things will fall into place. That's the way I was taught as growing up. I was taught to get a good education, you know, and you can write your own ticket. You know, I wasn't taught to function as a group, you know, organizing with other Black people to build something as a common interest. You know, it was always, you know, get a good education and write your own ticket. That's what I was taught. But the European is not that way. That's the way he was that they were showing, is that the European organizers are based on common interest and power, and to suppress those who can threaten their power. You know, so they misinform those like African people, you know, with this individualism to maintain white supremacy over us, and then they function and manage over us, like Dr. Wilson goes into, is to maintain us. They do that as a group, and they function as a collective.
Right. I don't even have anything to add to that, Sister Alima. That's really the gist of this entire section, that they preach a doctrine, or Dr. Amos Wilson calls it a myth of individualism. But like the brother Travis said, or Shimsu says, he said that, but they don't function that way. They function as a collective, but they preach to us, you know, they preach individualism to us.
That's right.
And I love how on 76 he says individual development. So just me as an individual, my development, my success and fulfillment. He said they're social products.
Right.
That's right.
Made possible by are the product of social relations and organizations, social experiences, social ideals and values, social institutions. That is how an individual develops.
Yes.
And in fact, I want to show some. I mean, we can keep on going, but okay, we can keep on going. But I see what you're saying right here, brother Travis. I'm looking at page 76. The bottom where it says white America is propaganda regarding individualism, notwithstanding is a national community built on social independence and cooperation. So they preach it, but they don't practice that.
Exactly.
So that's exactly what you're saying right there, brother Travis. I want to point out on 77, Dr. Amos Wilson says a group must empower itself as a whole if it is to empower its individual members. Right? So then he goes on to say the ideology of American individualism, he said it principally functions to justify and rationalize white Americans' culture of inequality. In America, we have a culture of inequality. And they justify that inequality by blaming it on you, by saying that it's a personal problem, right? That's right. It's not a social problem, it's a personal problem, right?
Yes.
Because they preach, as Brother Travis said, you know, as long as we go out, we get a good education, you know, we can survive in this world, right? As long as we do what is defined as the right thing, right? As long as we do what's the right thing, as long as we're what's defined as good people, we should be able to prosper in America, right? That's what they preach. So when you fail in America, it's not because of your skin, it's not because of your gender, right? It's not because of your skin or your gender. Right. You know, you can't blame it on those. They blame it on the person. It's you. You have a problem. You can't blame it on racism anymore, Black people, because you had the opportunity so and so had. This is the type of rhetoric that they teach our babies, and that type of rhetoric that has been inculcated and infused in our minds. And so Baba Amos Wilson on page 78, he says, if inequality exists, it's nothing more than a reflection of different personal qualities. So
Yeah.
that's what they're saying. It's not a social problem. It's a personal problem. You fail because of you, not because of your skin, not because of your gender, not because of your sexual orientation, not because of your class. It's a personal problem, right? That's what they utilize to justify this culture of inequality. So Baba Amos Wilson, in the middle of the paragraph on page 68, he says, believing uncritically in American individualism, African Americans reviewing their relative lack of success and powerlessness in a white American-dominated society, falsely conclude that their problem is not an opportunity structure, which perceive as constraining, but rather an insidious imitation of personal inadequacy, a sense of lacking the success or wealth and power they have, aspire to they are thereby lacking worth. Thus, the ideological trap sprung. So, he's saying, and then he goes on to say that the problems and failures and powerlessness haven't been, he said this stuff was mandated and socially engineered by European American power needs and aspirations, right? This stuff was engineered. So it has nothing to do with, it's not a personal problem. This is a social problem that we see. And they justify it by convincing you, by having you believe and subscribe to the myth of individualism.
That's right.
Let's move on to 79. We got 5 more pages. We coming down the wire.
79, it goes on to talk about, and it says if African Americans are going to successfully counteract socialization, subordination, and powerlessness of of the European community, then it's saying that we have to oppose it and bring our own rationalized ideology from an Afrocentric standpoint. So Baba is saying that the only way to combat their way of thinking in a European standpoint is to introduce our way of thinking from an Afrocentric standpoint. Then he goes on to give abiding characteristics of culture, wealth, and power, which, of course, he's been reiterating throughout the first 3 chapters, so I don't think we need to read those. Moving on, page 80, family. I had here the contextual nature of middle and upper class individual and group success, the social matrix, which makes such success possible, are conveniently ignored by Eurocentric social scientific propaganda. All success is attributed to drives, values, and other characteristics supposedly inherently possessed and spontaneously expressed by fortunate individuals and groups, which this goes further to what Dr. Maat was just saying, that success is basically something that they say you work for, you strive for, it's based off your goals, it's based off your ambition. They're saying that it's not something that could be a system that is actually set up against you, basically. Next on, they go on to talk about the Nation of Islam. Now, this is definitely.
Hold up, sis. Before we go there.
Okay.
I just want to add this. Hold on 1 second. I'm highlighting as we go along, but I want to add. I would like to add, because you started reading right below where I highlighted.
Okay.
Okay. He says on page 80. I'm looking at the first paragraph. Dr. Amos Wilson says the individual who is a member of the culture of wealth and power. Okay, so this is a member, an individual who is a member of the culture of wealth and power with a bit of ambition, just a bit of ambition and ability, is markedly more likely to realize his aspirations than is an individual who is a member of a culture of poverty and powerlessness, despite an abundance of ambition and ability. That's for the social, institutional, and economic advantages provided by the social matrix of the culture of wealth, power, greatly enhances the probabilities of success for those who are positioned and supported by that matrix. What I thought about, sis, when I read this book, I thought about the book called The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander.
Yes, good book.
In her book, she states that there's a low probability or low rate of upward class mobility. That it's a low chance. You know, I think it was maybe I don't know, Brother Travis, if it was 2% or 3%, but I know it was a very, very low percentage, a low probability of somebody of upward class mobility. So someone making it, someone advancing from, you know, maybe a poor or lower middle class to maybe lower middle class to maybe middle class or upper class. She was saying that probability is probably, you know, about 2.8%, maybe have a 2 to 3% chance of doing that. Why? Because of the system. So I thought about that when he was saying, well, look, if you're a member of, you know, this culture of wealth, your chances of, you know, of fulfilling your aspirations, you know, and your dreams is higher than somebody that you know, even though this other individual may have, you know, the ability and the ambition and the drive, but your chances, if you belong to this culture of wealth, you're more likely to achieve, you know, your goals than the person here. You get what I'm saying? And so I thought about, you know, this being the reason why there's a low rate of class mobility, upward class mobility. So that kind of stuck out to me. But we can move on to the Nation of Islam. Thank you so much, Brother Travis.
Page 81.
Yep.
It's like in the middle of the paragraph. It says, they do not perceive themselves to be the footstools of other peoples by divine decree, as is the case with many Black Christians. They are not to be sacrificial lambs in the interest of other peoples or in the name of some foreign notion of universal brotherly love. Others outside the nation, particularly whites, are to be rejected as models of emulation and are not to be targeted for racial assimilation or integration. White power and domination are to be subdued, not to be worshipped.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. You know, I was thinking about Dr. Amos. Go ahead, sister. I'm sorry.
Oh, no. All I was going to say is that that's just a big difference between Islam and Christianity, like a huge difference. I would say that's the biggest aspect, is the way that they view white people.
Right. Well, yeah, the Nation of Islam was set up precisely for that type of indoctrination. Because then I don't think Elijah really had the Arab.
That's right.
Put that together as a way to empower Black people here.
And that's what Dr. Amos Wilson was really pointing out is that
basically, you know, about military.
And Dr. John Henry Clark was pointing out a long time ago, our religion should be our tool for liberation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Time ago, you know, Dr. John Henry Clark, and what Dr. Amos Wilson was saying is to Africanize them. You know what I mean? If we're going to use those systems of spirituality, that we have to Africanize those systems.
I agree. He says that.
Right.
How well with that
word? Black Islam is a religion and culture which serves a people, not a religion which the people serve, as in the case of the Black Church.
Yes. Go ahead, sister. What were you saying? You were saying something. You was wondering how it would do what?
I wonder how would that work? Can you truly Africanize a European religion?
No.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think that's possible, because in order to Africanize it, you change the values, you change the morals, you change the whole essence of the religion itself. Therefore, it no longer makes it European.
Right. And it's actually just a colonizing tool. And it's something Dr. Ben said this years ago, that all of it came from Judaism. So you have Judaism, you have Christianity, and then you have the Muslim faith. And all of it is still just a tool to colonize the African mind. And even our European counterparts, those that delve into it, you know, they're being colonized and tricked and bamboozled at the same time. But I think Africans, we really need to establish, as someone said earlier, find our way back home, establish our own systems of system of values. And again, the ancestors left it on the walls for how we should worship and our spiritual system.
Now, my question is to y'all is, the Hebrew Israelites, are they successful of taking a religion like Judaism and using it as Hebrew and function as Hebrew Israelites? Are they successful with that?
Help, Lord. Don't sound so confused.
I don't think
they're
so.
confused as well. I don't think so, because I mean their doctrine is extremely Christian, but then they say they're not Christians. I don't know. It's confusing.
And they say they're not African.
Right.
Yeah.
True.
Right. They got an issue with black folk.
Right.
Yeah.
I
That's
know.
true.
Wait a minute here.
That's true. That's true.
It's way out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, moving on.
I just-
Towards the bottom, family.
That's where I am, Sister
Okay,
Alima.
it says the nation. I highlighted this because it was very similar to the way that the European model was, and it says that the nation is patriarchal in leadership and organization, meaning that its males have developed ways and means of intergroup cooperation and organization which permit them to act on coherent, cohesive, and collective terms. The nation presents a masculine face to the world of outsiders and relates to them on masculine terms of equality and power.
Sis, I just want to backtrack because I have that highlighted too, but I just wanted to point out that he says more than a religious institution, the Nation of Islam is a full-fledged black culture. He said it's
Yes.
a within a nation,
Mhm.
and he says, it includes all major institutions which define a people having a culture, a group identity and name, a religious institution unique to themselves, family and economic institutions, a military or paramilitary establishment, a distinct set of ethics, mores, folkways, and values, distinct modes of dress, distinct culinary and dietary style, a system of production and resource ownership and development. So that was right before what you said. And I remember last week, Brother Travis said, why is it? He posed the question. He's like, when you look at all these, religions, he said, I mean, they can galvanize people and get people together to accomplish something. He said, why can't we do this in the African community? And what I will say is that it seems to me that these religious systems are more organized.
Yes.
Seems like, and I'm not saying that the whole African Center community is organized, but I mean, I'm sitting here reading this, list of things: group identity and name, religious institution, military, a distinct system of ethics, folkways, mores, values, the way you dress, what you eat, a system of production and resource ownerships. It just seems like they're more organized.
Yes. This happened over time now. Because I've come into the slave culture. I left the slave culture in the 80s. The African, I remember I was kind of a wild guy, and they brought me into consciousness, some of the older gods. It was clear that you got to let that what you're doing out there go. I don't have to elaborate into all that, but it's a lot of nigga stuff. But it was in the 80s. I see a difference between what I see now in the conscious community and when I came in the 80s. It's not the same thing. I would have to say that it was a lot more of scoping out you and selecting. It was a clear difference. The difference between all this gangsterism and black consciousness. With a lot of the older gods, the way they were, they didn't allow you to bring that element to them, and we had more reverence for those who knew more and was part of the organization, part of these organizations for longer than we. A lot of them have went on to the ancestors, but it was more reverence for those who were elders that I see now. I see a lot of disrespect towards elders and those in the conscious community. And I see a lot of the element of the street life that wasn't prevalent in the 80s that's in there now. That's what I would have to say.
I agree with that 100%. I was still a baby in the 80s, but I do know that there was a difference, definitely. And I do agree that the thug element is trying to be, it is more so prevalent in the conscious community, but I wonder, is that because they're trying to bring in more people to try to change the way that they think, or what? I don't know.
It's the weakness on conscious people because the slave culture influences the conscious community. We try to emulate. We emulate a lot of. If you look at our youth that come up, because I come in organizations where I remember kids being babies and growing up in the conscious community and getting incarcerated and going to prison and even getting murdered. That we have the answers as conscious people. we listen, we're reading the right information, and we have the right elders that's in place that we follow their principles. You know, Jay-Z is not the answer. You know what I mean? And people like that. So what I'm saying is that I see with a lot of youth, just observing a lot of the youth, they allow the slave culture to influence them as opposed to standing on their own because they have the answers and they're right and standing on those principles.
Yes, yes.
Yep.
Well, I also think the vetting system is gone. You know, like now with social media, anybody can get on and have a YouTube channel and talk about that, and people will, you know, differentiate, you know, what's fact and what's fantasy. You know,
and our children, conscious children and conscious families, you know, because I've been in this so long, I've seen so many of the kids get caught up just like the people who didn't grow up in conscious community. Most people don't know Kwame Kilpatrick comes out of the conscious community. Kwame Kilpatrick's mother and father, we were all in the Shrine of the Black Madonna together. His mother was a minister. His father was a minister in the Shrine of the Black Madonna here in Detroit. Kwame grew up in the conscious community just like I did. Organization, the Shrine of the Black Madonna here. But we get so caught up, so many like Kwame, that we don't hear about winning the drugs, got incarcerated just like Kwame. We allowed the slave culture, too many conscious children who come from conscious families, they get sucked into that slave culture.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of look at it as a lot of people. They first found consciousness, or they were 5% of what they were still out there thugging, but they was giving all this knowledge, understand it. But so I just think that that's what it is. They're still at that point, fully realize, you know, they haven't let go of the slave mind, and we're still working on that.
That's right.
In various degrees.
Absolutely.
Our kids got to stand strong who are part of the conscious community, and we have to make them uncompromising.
But I agree with that. I agree with that, Brother Travis, 100%. But what I see is, you know, like you said, our children who are conscious, you're saying that they fall a victim to the slave culture, but that's because we're so dispersed within the community.
Yes,
so if we live in a community where they had conscious neighbors, they were going to, you know, they were playing with the children of these conscious neighbors.
Exactly.
Attending, you know, social functions of conscious people, and then also going to a school that transmits our type of consciousness. Then go to a spiritual center that reinforces our consciousness, transmits our culture, and teaches our ideology.
Exactly.
Then our children, I'm pretty sure they would not fall a victim to, you know, the slave mentality or the slave culture.
Let me
finish my thought, brother. When I look at the Jewish community,
What happened?
What's that?
Hey, something's going on.
I had the music. So when I look at the Jewish community here in Baltimore, the Jewish, now of course they're binded by their culture and their religion, right? So those Jews, they live together. They send their children. They control. They own and operate their own schools, and those children, of course, go there. Their spiritual centers are within their community. The businesses are within their community. So they have a stronger culture. You know, they make it almost impossible for their children to fall a victim to any type of alien culture, because it's kind of like they are.
Their environment is, like you said, it's their culture.
It's kind of like they're involved in their culture. You know, they live it, they drink their culture every day. Even in Howard County, I have a cousin, and she's probably watching right now. She's in Howard County teaching, and she was telling me that the Asian kids out there, they go to school with the other children. But she said when school lets out around 3:30, she said those Asian children, they go to another school. They're transported to another school where they are taught their history, culture, language. You get what I'm saying? And so our children fall a victim to these things because we don't have these things in place.
That's right. That's right.
Just wanted to add that.
So is it my question is can we successfully, if we know that systematically, we've had our own communities before, of course, Black Wall Street, you know, and organizations like that, you know, and also in Gainesville, Florida, we had a Black community, Rosewood. We've had our own Black communities as well. But my question is, can we successfully, because we know systematically they come after our organizations and destroy those. Even the Nuwaubians had their own land. And
oh Lord, we done lost the brother.
Oh, brother Travis.
Oh.
Oh man, because he was. I see where the point. I see the point that he was getting ready to, you know, that he was attempting to make.
But
But
can we do that without being infiltrated? Is the question.
the question. I think that if we if we begin being the primary motors and shapers of our babies' minds, then maybe there he is.
There he is.
Go ahead, brother Travis. Finish your thought, brother.
Go ahead.
oh yeah, what I was saying is, can we actually, should we, like the sister was talking about last week, should we repatriate? Is that the solution? Is just to leave this shit and just build somewhere else? What should we do here?
That's my solution. I don't have any suggestions.
I think I agree with you, sister.
I don't have any suggestions here. I just don't see it. I don't see it feasibly being able to. I could see it possibly starting, but I don't see them allowing it to be something, especially if it was to thrive. I just don't see them allowing that to happen without somehow figuring out some type of way to get their little pink hands on it. I just don't see it.
I agree.
Well, yeah, that's how are we going? How are we going to fight this system? If or is it like it's like a dead end? It's not going to happen. We just, you know.
Hey, Dr. Amos Wilson said, function as a nation, you know, within a nation, and then or repatriation. One or the other. Either function as a nation in a nation and develop your own political, economical, social and educational institutions, and function as a nation within a nation, or repatriate. I think those are our only options.
I agree. I think, you know, I mean, we've had centuries of lessons, and we know their tricks. So we should be, you know, able to, you know, bypass some of all this stuff that, you know, that they try to bring to us. By now, I think.
I agree, sis.
Yep.
Absolutely. So let's continue, y'all. We're on page 82, and we have like 2 more pages to get through. And these are fairly, I don't want to say they're easy pages, but you know, he talks about the Nation of Islam right after Sister Alima ended with the nation presents a masculine face to the world of outsiders and relates to them on masculine terms of equality and power. So he says that Black Islam empowers its adherents, right? He said that they are against the pie in the sky mentality and that they have a race first mentality. He also ends this paragraph by saying that the Nation of Islam has demonstrated entrepreneurial drive and provided a model for African American economic development. I concur with that. But we have to, if someone would take what he's saying and they would run away and act as if he's advocating for African people to join the Nation of Islam. He's not. And he has these caveats in the last paragraph. Yes. He begins with this system. He says, we must hasten to notify our readers that we are not hearing proselytizing for the Nation of Islam. He said, we're merely using it as an example, right, of a Black-centered organization, right? And what a Black-centered organization, or the effects of a Black-centered organization can have on us. And then he says, well, you know, there were other models that we can use. He said movements such as those led by Marcus Garvey, right? He said, who was the precursor of the Nation of Islam in a number of very important ways. So he's just saying that, look, we can pull from these, you know, even as African-centered people, there are models that we can utilize, you know, or, you know, we could take components from these different organizations. He's saying, and he said these include, where are we? He says the race first mentality, right? The educational and economic institutions relations, right? The do for self orientation, the manhood training, the womanhood training, the familyhood training, the institution building. But he said, but we need to Africanize it. These things or these components and systems should be all African centered. He said, otherwise they will become the facilitators of the exploitation, manipulation, if not the domination of African peoples by outsiders and their enemies. So he concludes with the last section, the spirit of war. But before we begin that, I just want to welcome Minister Asar from the Temple of New African Thought on the panel. Thank you so much, Minister Asar, for joining us.
Yes, indeed.
Mr. Asar?
Mr. Asar.
Peace and power. Peace and power. I'm on mute.
Okay, cool. Thank you for joining us, Minister Asar. How are you?
I'm doing great. Just getting in. Yeah. Thank you. Peace, everybody.
Hey, well, I'm glad you're on the panel, and we were combing through chapter 3 of Blueprint for Black Power, where he's talking about the social and cultural origins of power. And now we're on page 83, the last section of the chapter, the spirit of war. The spirit of war. And he says that the nation and the white Christian church share in common an assertive, warlike, and martial tradition, a tradition of making war against their enemies and defending themselves against their enemies. So he goes on to say, if you look at the Black Muslim God, just as his white counterpart, easily assumed aspects of God of war, or at least approves of war in the interest of its adherents, right? But then he goes on to the Black church and he says, well, wait a minute. The Black church, servant of white American interests, that is, in the African community, shorn of its African cultural traditions, are bereft of a warrior tradition, mentality, and outlook, right? So he's saying that we don't train up, if you look at the Black church, they're not in church preparing for a war. They're telling you to turn the other cheek. They're telling you to love your enemy. You get what I'm saying? They're not training for a war. They're not even training to defend themselves against one, right? They're just teaching us to submit to power and to submit to abuse, really. So he's saying that, he says, except when called into military service by their white masters, they not only ignore the study and practice of war and of military strategy, but in essence, eschew them. He says the military and warrior traditions, the martial arts, and material strategic thinking indigenous to African history and culture was lost to the African American community as a result of its deculturation during and after slavery. The patriarchal organization, identification, and cooperation required and imbued by warfare has been lost to the Black community, along with the ability to utilize and apply military-like strategy, military-like organization to non-military arenas. Okay. So we've lost that, sis. If you look at the Black church, those men are in there aren't armed, and they probably don't know how to defend the women and children, or even themselves, right. In that church. When you look at the white Christian churches, or when you look at the Muslims, they're training to do that. And what I love about the Temple of New African Thought, they do teach their members Tai Chi. So they're teaching the members how to defend themselves. The men learn how to defend the women and the children. And so as African people, we have to, again, study military strategies and military intelligence. Does anyone want to add to anything?
Yeah, I'm familiar with Brother Asar, and also Brother it's the PLM, Pan-African Liberation Movement. I think out there also is a good organization. Yeah, they're doing some great work out there in the Baltimore area. I'm quite familiar with them, brothers.
Absolutely, and absolutely. I say Baltimore.
Fatu, I think Brother Fatu was the other brother. Is out there?
Yeah, Brother Imhotep Fatu.
Yeah, Fatu. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm quite familiar with them. They're doing great work.
Absolutely. So I want to end this discussion with this last paragraph.
Yeah, that last paragraph summed it up.
Go ahead, read it, sis, because this is the truth. This is the absolute truth.
To ensure its last paragraph, page 84, family. To ensure its survival and well-being, its full empowerment and liberation, the African American community must not only capture its internal markets, but capture a significant portion of America's national production facilities and markets, and rigorously engage in international trade. To accomplish these necessary goals, the community must painstakingly examine the nature and functionality of its culture and cultural institutions. It must especially examine and revise its family and religious institutions, rebuild and build anew its economic and educational institutions. Of especially great importance, the African American community must train its boys very carefully, intelligently, and intensely for manhood. African American manhood must be redefined in ways which positively redefine the relations of African men to women, their families, and community. Above all, they must be taught the skills of manly intimacy, honor, cooperation, reliability, and loyalty to community. They must reassume their role as warriors, defenders of family and community, as assertive and skillful traders, strategic thinkers, and superb tacticians. The power of community is the power of its men and women. It cannot long survive half slave and half free.
Does anyone want to add? So we gotta, I mean,
No.
this is our rites of passage programs, you know, our manhood training and our womanhood training,
Yes.
you know, familyhood training, you know, all of these things are our rite of passage programs. And I mean, I actually have this paragraph highlighted right here. So that was a very powerful paragraph, you know, that we had to train our boys. It says very carefully and intelligently and intensely for manhood. A lot of our young boys don't know what it means to be a man. They think that, you know, sagging your pants and showing your buttocks is being a man. They think that the number of women that they have sex with or the number of babies they produce is manly. They think, you know, selling drugs in the community is manly. So we had to do better in training our boys, you know, like he says, very carefully and intelligently and intensely for manhood. And even with our women, you know, even our little girls, they don't understand what it means, you know, to be a woman. They think that, you know, wearing, you know, a certain type of garment or, you know, being able to carry a baby or, you know, a man taking care of whatever, you know, they think that that is what defines, you know, womanhood, and it's not.
Yes.
And so it is very important that we have them in some sort of manhood training, womanhood training. It's very, and again, I always say that this should be a part of the educational process. Your educational process should teach you manhood. It should contain manhood training and womanhood training. I remember going to Randallstown track one day, and I was working out, and while I was there were some young boys out there, and I started building with the young kings, and they were juniors and seniors. And when I asked them, I said, "Could you define manhood?" They said, "No, I can't." So here, these are juniors and seniors in school, but they cannot define manhood. They did not know what it means to be a man, and that's a problem when our children undergo an educational process and they come out of it and they have no idea of who they are. They have no idea of what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman, what is your responsibility to your community. So our kids aren't being educated, they're being miseducated. You get what I'm saying? And so that's all I have. Does anyone want to add anything?
Nope.
No.
Powerful.
Minister Starr?
Yeah, you know, that I guess I would. You know, I think what you said, Dr. Maya, is very important. And one of the things that I think that Dr. Amos is clear on here is that we have to be able to operate on all levels. And I think even in our circles, our conscious circles, we have begun to look at manhood in one way. I think I heard the brother saying earlier before my phone went off, talking about it's this spirit of gangsterism that you see in the conscious community. And we have taken that street culture, brought it into the conscious community, and somehow
Yes,
it's still pervasive as being the ideal or symbol of manhood. And people masculizing yourself or even the pants hanging off your tail, like you said, that's still a part of the quote unquote community. So one thing I realized through dealing with young men, dealing with their fathers, that men have to be able to commit to organization. In fact, if a man is not committed to organization, he needs to get off YouTube because I'm telling you, what we do is we just create individuals. So in creating individuals, because all we say is everybody's a scholar, but nobody wants to commit to organization. Everybody knows all the information, but nobody wants to commit. So what I'm saying is we have to show our young men. We can't just talk it. We just can't read it. We have to do it. And we can do all the rite of passage programs in the world, but we got to get ourselves right so we can get our children right. So yeah, and we have to operate on all levels. I like to tell people this: warriorhood doesn't look like you're a gangster. You understand? They got warriors on all different levels, because the people who make the atomic bomb don't walk around with their pants hanging up. The people who make the atomic bombs aren't the same people who are on the front lines. But guess what? Those people who are on the front, the people who making them atomic bombs can blow whole countries up. Right. Dr. Amos Wilson speaks about it as well. He says that, he said, you got to really understand the most dangerous people are not, they're the most educated people. It's that person with a PhD who you have to worry about. Because that PhD, they making all types of stuff to kill mankind. So we have to realize that, we got to stop. This is my thing, and this is what I've been on for a minute. We got to stop the house Negro, first Negro, field Negro thing, and we got to realize we got to bring all the Negroes together. But nonetheless, we got to stop it. Because I like to say that every revolutionary in our time, I'm talking about all the revolutionaries throughout all the history, most of them had above education. Yes. Above education. So what I'm saying, let's stop making people who have education weak, and let's stop beating up on a person. We got to come together. That's all I'm trying to say. It's easy to beat up on a person once they get a degree.
That's right. That's right. So,
we need everybody. We need everybody.
That's right.
Let me ask you a question, Minister Sauce. So you said you're of the opinion that we need everybody. So you don't believe that some people will be left behind? Because I don't.
Some people will be left.
I don't believe that we need everybody, but I believe that the reality is that it won't be everybody.
But let me quantify let me qualify what I'm saying.
Okay.
Qualify what I'm saying.
That's true.
What I'm saying is we need people from different yokes. Not everybody's going to come, but what I mean is we need people all of different calibers.
Okay.
So we need people. Let me make it clear. We need people from who gonna push the damn broom to the people who gonna create the damn atomic weapon.
Yes. Okay.
You know what I'm saying? So what I mean is we need all variations of people. Variations. I think it'd be too idealistic for me to mean when I say everybody, I mean every person count on the earth.
But Minister, and thank you for clarifying that for me. But you do have some people who believe like that, that in order to kick this thing off, that we just need everybody.
No, we need a small percentage.
Right.
That's only a small percentage of people to make something happen.
That's right.
There might be some truth in Du Bois's statement. Let me stop for y'all getting.
You know what? You talking about a talented 10th?
I have a question for the group. Do you think as a people, even in our organizations, we are sometimes maybe too loud? What I mean by that is, we're too flashy and we show off too much, whatever we're doing, whatever we're, coming up with. And it alerts our enemy and they, come and destroy what we're building.
Definitely.
With the Nation of Islam, this is an underground group. They have an infrastructure. And nobody really even thinks about them.
That's right. But you know what I like about what you saying, sister, that he emphasized, Dr. Amos Wilson emphasized the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's Nation of Islam. That's right. That's what I agree.
That's what I'm talking about.
A clear distinction.
I'm talking about that where they're
She's disappeared.
She's gone? She's gone?
She's gone. She made a great point there.
Oh, okay.
Are you there, sis?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was just wondering because I think a lot of our organizations are destroyed because we put them out too far out in the forefront.
Mm-hmm.
I think social media is a big proponent in that, you know, people want to put everything that they're doing, everything they're involved in, because, you know, they want likes or comments or whatever. But at the same sense, when you're trying to build certain things, you have to have a certain level of discretion. And that we don't understand. I mean, they had issues with infiltration way before social media even came around. So imagine now.
Well, yeah, that's my point.
You know, it is, exactly.
You know, they were out there, you know, going off, you know, I mean, rightfully so, but I think that might have been, you know, once it got to a point where, you know, it was just so broad that, you know, even, you know, white people knew about it.
Right.
That's when they came to destroy them.
Exactly.
You know? So I think going forward, I mean, we need a different approach as to how we reach our people. And, you know, we just can't be, you know, a lot of people like to show off. So maybe that's, we can't have, you know, charismatic people that are like just individuals.
Mm-hmm.
But we also need to build a system where if one is destroyed, the system can still perpetuate itself.
That's right.
Because, you know, before, once they chopped off the head, that was it. It was over.
Right.
Once they got rid of Malcolm, that was that. Once they got rid of Stokely, Fred Hampton, and people, you know, they just went through the whole organization and chopped the heads off, and the rest of it just withered and died. You know?
Yes.
Absolutely.
But guess what? We're still here.
Yeah, we are still here.
And we're making great strides. I just want to add that I think once we, and I keep saying this, I guess this is where the vein I'm on tonight. The closer we get back to home and understand even the spirit of Ma'at, and the spiritual principles that our ancestors left handed down to us and continue to download to us, I think that'll weed out, you know, those who are still stuck with that plantation mindset. Excuse me for saying this, but that nigga mindset, you know, but those who that are spiritually conscious will understand the movement, will treat one another and those elders with respect, you know, those who have the knowledge, you know, they'll understand their place in this movement that's going forward. But those who don't connect with the spirit of mind, who don't connect with the ancestors, I mean, they will be weeded out, as my sister said. Not everybody's going to come along with us.
And I said that there's a documentary coming out or produced by Revolutionary Minds, brother Keith Horton, and I'm on there. Brother Black Panther from Marcy Warrior Clan of the Amun Ra Squad, he's on there, and they asked the question, they posed the question: revolution or exodus? And on that documentary, when I was being interviewed, he asked me to name some of the cons of revolution or some of the cons of exodus. And I said that one of the cons is that everybody isn't going to make it. And it may be your mom, it may be your dad, it may be your children, it may be, you know, people that are closest to you. And that is one of the cons of our liberation, that everyone is not going to make it. And that's something that we have to deal with. But great conversation. I look forward to us meeting next week again at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Next week, we will be discussing chapter 4, consciousness and power. So a lot of people call themselves conscious. And I got to be honest, the definition of consciousness, Minister Asar, he reads this on his show a lot. It's on page 91 of the Blueprint for Black Power, where he defines consciousness. And so we're going to get into that next week. Consciousness and power. So a lot of us run around and we call ourselves conscious, but are we really? Are we really behaving like a conscious people? Because consciousness, or to be conscious, is more than just being aware. And Dr. Amos Wilson brings it out in this chapter. You know, in fact, he defines it as an adaptational force. But anyway, we're going to get into that. So next week, you know, he's going to discuss consciousness and power. This is going to be a light chapter, guys. Only 14 pages, page 85 to 99. So this is going to be a light chapter, and I think.
How long is the fifth one?
Let me see. The fifth one starts on page 100, and it ends on page 108. So,
So should we just read both chapters then?
yeah, we can. We can go from 85 to, yeah, we can, sis, because look, that's only 23 pages.
Right. So let's just
That's right.
let's read chapters 4, 5.
All right, and chapter 5 talks about the self-concept and power. Oh my goodness. The self-concept
Powerful.
and power. So we'll be going through chapter 4 and 5. We'll read chapter 4 and 5 for next week.
Okay.
Oh my gosh, I'm looking forward to these chapters. I don't think you guys know how excited I am right now.
I already read chapter 4, so I'm definitely excited.
Uh-oh.
She had everybody. She had everybody.
Absolutely, sis. Well, I only read the chapter. I only read the chart on page 81, and that was the chart that Minister Saar gave me last year. But yeah, I'm looking forward to like really delving deep into this chapter. So, do you guys have anything else to add, or do you want to conclude the discussion? Or
That's it for me.
Is everyone connected? I have a question. Is everyone connected on your Facebook page? I would like to connect with everyone if that's cool.
oh yeah, we're all on the same Facebook page. Well, my Facebook name is Deanna Bailey. So if you send me a
Okay.
Facebook request, brother, I'm sorry, a friend request, I can accept it right now while I'm on the computer.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay.
The man is Shimsu Netcher.
Yeah, I think we are friends already.
Yeah, I'm friends with
Mine is
Deanna. I'm
Kenny
like,
O'Malley, page 3.
okay. Mine is under Paul Robeson. I'm repping his name for a couple of months.
Okay.
I know exactly who this brother is. Paul Robeson.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay, and also, Sister Alima, tell them about the website. So, like, you know, if we get censored on Facebook, we have, an alternate means of communication. So please share the website, sis, again.
Well, once again, family, if you want to stay updated on the RAM, you can check out my site, www.lelelapoete, speaks.com. And we have a page exclusively for the Resurgence of the African Mind group, also for Blueprint for Black Power. Every week I will be putting down a small breakdown of each chapter, and also the links will be provided if you want to join the panel or if you just want to listen via YouTube. So
Can you paste that in the group chat?
yeah, I will put it in there right now, the information, and we also can blog about it as well. We have a blog page set up.
So could you spell that out one more time, please, sis?
I'm about to drop it right in the I'm about to put it in the comment section, sis.
Okay.
And what I'll do, Sister Alima, is I'll add it to the description box, like under the video. So if people, just a link to your website so people can access it there. So I'll make sure I put it in the description box.
Okay.
What's the name of the YouTube
all about
She said, what's the YouTube channel, sis?
Dr. Maat. I didn't it's on my page, Dr. Maat, Dr. Maat. But we need to develop a YouTube page strictly for RAM.
Yes.
Yes.
We definitely need to do that. But as of lately, I've been using my own personal YouTube page.
Okay.
Okay, I'm putting it in the group now, family.
Okay.
I'm just excited to be a part, fam.
Yeah, me too. It makes me.
Same here.
Oh yeah, likewise.
Chop it up.
All right.
I look forward to this group every Sunday. I never forget that we meet.
I'll be waiting till I'll be counting down.
And it seems like we're moving right along. Like, I love it. 4 and 5, like, oh man.
Yeah.
Because you guys point out things that I didn't see, and I got to go back and read that. I'm like, yeah, he did say that.
So we had it.
Yeah, it's definitely like a crystallization. It's just like, some of that stuff is so powerful. It's like, bam, whoa. It's
I've had this book so many years, and I haven't read this book. It's incredible.
I'm telling you, when I hang up with you guys, I'm gonna be calling Brother Sababu and talk to him about our discussion for probably another hour. Because when I get on the phone with the elder, he keeps me. But I listen. I learned a lot.
I talked to him after Dr. Amos Wilson died, like a week after Dr. Amos Wilson died. I called him. And that's who I got, was that brother.
Yeah, brother Sababu, he's a good brother. And he told me to tell you guys that
African Info System, right? Is that the name of it?
Yeah, African Global Info Systems.
The Global Info System, right? I remember that brother.
Absolutely, and he wanted me to send his love, and he said he really just appreciates, you know, all of us. There were a lot of people who bought autographed books, A Blueprint for Black Power, and those funds were sent over to him. As a matter of fact, he sent me 18 copies. We've sold about 11 copies, and so, you know, and this is 11 copies at, you know, $40 a copy. So we're looking at, you know, $440 that have been sent to this brother, you know, which will enable him to continue to produce and publish the great works of our ancestor, Dr. Amos Wilson. So he's very appreciative of this book club, and he you know, he wants me to send my love. He told me to send his love to you all, and that he appreciates what we're doing.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so by the time we finish, you know, selling all of his books, 18 times 40, that'll be $720 that we sent African Global Info Systems.
Nice.
Just from merely studying his work, Dr. Amos Wilson's work. All right, so with that said, family, we're going to end this broadcast. Have a wonderful and productive week. Peace and Black Power.
Peace and love.
Peace and Black